Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 128, Hokage vs. Raikage. The Hokage had received news that the fourth Raikage wished to meet in person to discuss a peace proposal. Hiruzen sat in his office after he had read the scroll, making his mind up and coming to a decision. Very well, Itachi, have word sent to the Raikage that I will meet with him. The Hokage said, taking a large puff on his pipe. Very well, sir, Itachi said, nodding his head. The Hokage also had an important decision to make as to who he would take as his aide. The summons had been very specific on how many men to bring from each side in order for the meeting to go ahead. After all, taking too many men would be perceived as a potential threat, and taking too little could leave oneself open to assassination. Itachi, the Hokage said before he walked out of the room, causing Itachi to turn around and look his leader in the eye. I want you to come with me to the meeting with the Raikage, Hiruzen said, taking Itachi by surprise. Me? But sir. He started. No buts, Itachi, you will join me, unless you don't want to, Hiruzen said with a smile on his face. Itachi gave in and also smiled. Very well, sir. He said, nodding his head in respect. Hiruzen watched as Itachi dismissed himself, knowing he would have to choose another to bring with him to the meeting, already having a candidate in mind. With that, Itachi headed home, signing off duty so he could prepare for his new mission as one of the Hokage's aides. Itachi walked through the village before getting to the Uchiha district, located on the outskirts. He watched the hustle of everyone there, each of them going about their business before waving to Itachi as he walked past them, heading towards his home. Big brother, big brother. A voice said coming from behind him. Itachi turned around to see his younger brother Sasuke running over to him with a happy expression. You're home early, Sasuke said, running alongside his brother to greet him. Ah, Sasuke, Itachi said, returning his smile. Yes, I finished early today, he also said, seeing the scuff marks on his brother's clothing. How was your day at the academy? Itachi then asked. It was great. First, we had shuriken practice, then we did taijutsu, he said, pointing his thumb at himself. Of course, I won, nobody can beat me, he said, acting cocky. Is that right? Itachi said with a smile, proud of his younger brother. The two turned the last corner that led them towards their house, seeing a group of the Uchiha police standing with none other than the head of the Uchiha clan and their father. Itachi didn't catch what they were talking about but could tell whatever it was, they didn't want him to hear about it. Ah, Itachi, welcome home, Fugaku said, greeting his son. Father, Sasuke said, flashing his father a smile as he ran over to him. And Sasuke too, my what a surprise, he said, looking at the others. We shall finish this conversation another day, for now, I have something to talk about with my son, Fugaku said, dismissing the others. Itachi could tell that there was still unrest among the Uchiha clan. He had hoped that with the death of Danzo and the talks of peace between the Hokage and his father, the unrest would settle, but he knew better than to believe in such trivial things as hope. Come Itachi, we need to talk, Fugaku said, turning on his heel. Itachi nodded and started to follow, seeing the look on his brother's face as he did. Don't worry Sasuke, we can talk later, he said, poking his brother on the forehead as he usually did, getting a smile from the boy. Itachi walked into his father's office, taking a seat by the table and waiting to see what his father had to say. I'm sure you are already aware, Itachi, Fugaku started, taking a seat before he continued. But the unrest among our clan is still growing, Fugaku said, looking into his son's eyes. Itachi chose to remain silent and waited for his father to continue. I know you will be escorting the Hokage on his trip to meet with the Raikage, Fugaku said, taking Itachi by surprise that he already knew that information. And it had been decided by the clan that the time to strike is upon us, Fugaku said. Strike? Itachi asked. With Danzo dead and the village torn in between another war with the other nations, we feel that the time has come for the Uchiha to take our seat at the village's head and lead a new path towards our future, Fugaku said, seeing that Itachi hadn't given him any signs or signals yet. Don't say it, father, Itachi said after a moment of silence, causing Fugaku to give him a stern look. It's out of my hands now, Itachi, Fugaku said, seeing where his son stood in this. It has already been decided by the clan, Fugaku said. You are the head of the Uchiha clan, surely you can convince them that this is not the right path for the village, Itachi said, trying to reason with his father. Fugaku sighed as he scratched his head. You don't seem to understand the position we are in. I have done everything I can to hold them back, but now, with or without me, the men are going to act. It's either this, or it's a civil war between the Leaf and the Uchiha. Fugaka said. Itachi could tell that this was not what his father wanted. But he could also tell that he stood with the clan rather than with the village. You are the only one who can get close enough to the Hokage to get the job done without this backfiring on us, Fugaka said, crossing his arms over his chest. Once he is out of the way, I will step in as the 5th Hokage, and pave a new path for our clan and for our village. Fugaka said, seeming to have a new ambition burning within his eyes. Itachi was shocked that it had come to this, and in honesty, he did not know where he stood. Fugaka could see that he was struggling within himself as to what to do and decided to share his ideas with him. Itachi, allow me to show you the future of what could come, Fugaka said, activating his Manjikyu Sharingan and placing Itachi in his Genjutsu, taking his son by surprise. Itachi saw the sudden flash of red in his father's eyes as they changed their pattern, eclipsing him under his Genjutsu and showing him both paths they could take. Itachi watched as the first one fell underway with the Uchiha capturing Naruto and unleashing the Nine Tails under Fugaka's control with his Sharingan, using the power of the beast to take control of the whole village by force, starting a war which would result in the destruction of the village, leaving them open to invasion from the other nations. No. Itachi said as he watched the village he loved burn to the ground, unable to stop it. I told you. It doesn't have to be like this. His father's voice said again, showing him the other option. Itachi watched as he killed the 3rd Hokage from a distance, watching the effects that his death would have upon the village and its people as his father took up the position as the new Hokage, bringing a brighter future to both the clan and the village by uniting them both under his rule. The Genjutsu ended as quick as it had started and Itachi dropped forwards, feeling his heart racing from what he had just witnessed. When did you gain the Manjikyu Sharingan? Itachi asked slowly, not looking up from the ground. I unlocked this power during the 3rd Shinobi War. After I failed to save my clan members and people, I called my friends. Fugaka said, remembering the moment with a heavy heart. You have seen for yourself what can be. Now you must choose the future that will best fit your path. Fugaka said, keeping his arms crossed. My path? Itachi asked, looking at his father again, suddenly realizing what his father was hinting at. You knew. You knew all along what Danzo was planning. What I was willing to do. Itachi said in surprise. I did. But that time has passed us, and I will no longer allow that future to come to pass. Fugaka said, almost as a warning to Itachi. Itachi knew that if his father possessed the Manjikyu Sharingan, he was no longer a match for him. Don't fight me, Itachi. I want you by my side to help protect our village. Fugaka then said, lowering his head to his son, something that Itachi had never thought he would see. Together we can build upon what the past Hokage have created and put their mistakes behind us as we work together to create an even greater village, Fugaka said, begging his son to help him achieve his goals. Itachi was shocked and didn't know what to say. After seeing his options and knowing that his father was prepared to fight to achieve them, he knew there was no hope in stopping him now. Leaving him with only one choice to secure a future for the village. The next day came quickly for Itachi, a little too quickly given that he had failed to sleep for most of the night thinking about what he should do. Itachi had thought about speaking to Shisui about what his father was planning, however, he was on a mission for the Hokage and out of reach, leaving Itachi to make this decision alone. With that all done, Itachi reported to the Hokage's estate, where they would begin their journey to the meeting point with the Raikage. Good morning, Itachi. Hiruzen said, greeting the young Uchiha as he titled his Hokage's hat towards him. Good morning, sir. Itachi said, greeting him back with a bow. Itachi also noticed another standing with the Hokage, seeing that it was the commander of all of the Umbu under the Hokage. He was wearing his white cloak and black trousers with bandages tied around his right leg, arm guards, gloves, and black sandals. He also has brown, spiky, hair and wears a mask with a dog motif inclusive of pointed ears, detailed eyebrows and 3 thick stripes with 2 along either side of his cheek and 1 on his forehead. He nodded to Itachi and Itachi nodded to him back, knowing that if the Hokage was bringing him along, then he was serious about having skilled shinobi by his side during the meeting with the Raikage. Very well then, if you are both ready, shall we make a move? Hiruzen said as he lit his pipe with a match. Yes sir. The head of the Umbu said, following along before he looked over at Itachi. I shouldn't need to tell you but keep your guard up at all times. He spoke. Yes sir, Itachi said, nodding to his commander. To be at the top head of the Umbu was a top secret position that even Itachi didn't know the name of the person in charge. He reported only to the Hokage and elders himself and no one else knew him. He also had overall authority in regard to anything if the Hokage was not able to make a decision, meaning that he was indeed a powerful member of the village, meaning he was equally powerful in his own right, holding much influence in the ideals of the village. With that the 3 of them left the village, keeping out of sight until they got onto the main road. That way the villagers wouldn't have to worry about knowing that the Hokage himself was leaving, meaning there would be panic over the situation. After all, the meeting with the Raikage was top secret, and a need to know that only the top brass of the village knew about. The meeting itself was set to take place on the border of the Land of Frost, a neutral nation that sat between the land of lightning and the land of fire, making it the perfect place for the meeting, as it was equal for each party to travel to. The three of them made their way towards the meeting, heading there at a steady pace as they had plenty of time before the meeting. For the most part, they traveled in silence, with the Hokage simply humming a small tune as he smoked his pipe, seeming to be at ease as he enjoyed the journey. Itachi was keeping his senses sharp and alert so that nothing would take them by surprise, as was the Umbu commander, who also kept a close eye on Itachi, something that he could feel him doing. Itachi had hoped that he would be able to have a conversation with the Hokage, perhaps telling him about his father's plan to overthrow him and take control of the village by force if he needed to. But he didn't see the time to do such a thing at the moment. He was also sure that if the Umbu commander got wind of this plan, then there would be a full-scale war between the Uchiha and the village. Itachi knew that he would have to handle this situation carefully and had decided that he would speak to the Hokage after the meeting with the Raikage, knowing that he would know what to do. "Is something on your mind, Itachi?" Hiruzen suddenly asked, taking Itachi off guard for a moment, as if he had read his mind. "No, sir," Itachi said after a small pause, trying to contain his thoughts so that his answer didn't give anything away. "Very good," Hiruzen said, taking another puff on his pipe. However, the Hokage was no fool and could indeed tell that there was something weighing heavily on the boy's mind. "Sir, we are almost at the meeting point," the Umbu commander said, noting that they had arrived at the border of the land of hot water, about to cross into the land of frost. "Yes, it would seem so," Hiruzen said, noting that the weather had gotten much colder as they continued on their journey. "I know the leader of the village hidden in the frost agreed to this meeting to take place in their land, but keep your guard up," the Umbu commander said, knowing that even though they were only a small shinobi village, they could still try something. Now. I don't think we have anything to worry about from our friends here in the land of frost," the Hokage said, chuckling to himself. Both Itachi and the Umbu commander remained quiet as they continued to scout the area, seeing that there was no sign of anyone watching them. "Come now, let us press on to the final part of our journey," Hiruzen said, seeming to speed up a little, getting both of them to do the same, following his lead. Soon enough the three of them arrived at a large mountain that would be the setting for their meeting place. The mountain was covered in snow and ice, seeming to take on the appearance of a large dragon's head. "What is this place?" Itachi asked, having never seen it before. "This is Dragon Fang Mountain," Hiruzen said, keeping his hands wrapped behind his back as the cold air blew from the top of the mountain. Suddenly, Itachi and the Umbu commander put up their guard as they sensed someone approaching, seeing that it was a ninja from the hidden cloud. "Greetings, Lord Hokage," he said, getting a nod from the Hokage. "Please, Lord Raikage has sent me to fetch you, if you would be so kind as to follow me," he then said, extending his arm for them to follow him. The Hokage did so without question, seeming a little too trusting for Itachi's liking. The three of them soon arrived at a large opening that looked like the mouth of a dragon. The outside of the cave was decorated with the flag bearing the markings for the hidden cloud and leaf, set up to be suitable for the two Kage to meet. Itachi could see two other cloud shinobi standing outside of the cave. One being Darui and the other being what looked like a member of the hidden cloud's Umbu. "Greetings, Lord Hokage," Darui said, rubbing his head as he walked over towards them. "Lord Raikage is inside the cave waiting for you," he then said, turning around as he took a step inside of the dragon's mouth. The Hokage nodded and followed him inside, turning to Itachi and the Umbu commander before he did. "Please, Itachi, come with me," Hiruzen said, surprising Itachi that he chose him to follow inside. The Umbu commander nodded and waited outside of the cave, knowing that only other was allowed to enter the cave with the Hokage as per the agreement between the two Kage, and remained outside with the Cloud Umbu member. Hiruzen walked into the cave to see that seating had been arranged and that the Raikage was already sitting waiting for him to arrive. "Lord Raikage, it's a pleasure to see you again," Hiruzen said, greeting him. "Ah. Lord Hokage," said as he stood up from his seat, also greeting Hiruzen as he waited for him to sit down. Itachi had never seen the Raikage before and couldn't help noticing how strong he looked, as well as sensing his huge chakra. "I do apologize if you have been waiting long, Lord Raikage," Hiruzen said, making conversation. "Not at all," said, looking at Hiruzen and then at Itachi. "Shall we move on to business then?" the Raikage suddenly said, giving Hiruzen the sense that he didn't want to waste time. "Very well, let us talk peace," Hiruzen said, feeling a sudden seriousness form in the atmosphere. "Yes, peace," the Raikage said as he slowly leaned forwards, interlocking his hands with a serious look forming on his face. "I have taken a step back during this war so far, feeling as if my nation has no need for the petty squabbling that brought this all about." The Raikage started. "However, after witnessing the combined strength between the leaf and the mist, I can no longer stand by and wait for you to eclipse us in power. That is why I summoned you here to meet with me, Lord Hokage." "What is it you are asking, Raikage?" Hiruzen asked, not liking where he was going with this. "I am demanding that you break off your alliance with the Mizukage," said, leaning back into his chair as he watched the Hokage carefully. And why would I want to do that? The Hokage asked, already knowing the answer. If you do not, I will not sit by and wait for you both to grow in power. Your alliance has already thrown the power balance in our world off, and it is time to be set straight. Hiruzen sighed and slowly reached for his pipe, causing Dowie's eye to flinch a little before he realized it was just a smoking pipe. This is not something I wanted to hear today, Hiruzen said, lighting the pipe and taking a puff. Here I thought I had traveled all this way to barter peace between our two nations, yet instead you stand before me with only threats. I take it if I am to say no, then that would mean you will be joining the war against myself and the Mizukage. Hiruzen asked. That's right. I said, not backing down. Hiruzen blew out a large puff of smoke, giving a large sigh as he weighed up his options. Sometimes the toughest decisions bring severe consequences, yet although the easier option may seem presentable in those situations, that does not mean it is the right one, Hiruzen said, seeming to tug at Itachi as he said them. That is something that even in my old age I am still learning. Hiruzen said, looking the Raikage in the eye. I am afraid that the alliance between the leaf and the mist will stand. We will not back down to your threats. Hiruzen said, getting an angry glare from the Raikage. Do you really think that the Mizukage will honor your alliance as you have, to risk war and death upon your people for another who could betray you on a whim? The Raikage shouted, growing more enraged that Hiruzen was not budging. I can see you are a man of action, just as your father was before you, Lord Raikage. However, my alliance with the Mizukage means more to me and my village than to let others try to bully us away from our goals for peace, even if that means we risk your wrath. Hiruzen said, feeling the Raikage getting angrier. Do not forget, Raikage, that it was your nation that caused so much bloodshed for my own. You and your father before you have made many efforts to indulge in war with the leaf, and I can see no reason now as to why you would want peace at all. The Mizukage. That bastard. If you will not accept my terms, then you shall see my wrath and you will have war. I yelled as he suddenly slammed his fist into the table that sat between the two Kage, breaking it in two with ease. Itachi didn't like the situation and had already activated his Sharingan, seeing that Darui was also reaching for his sword. Hiruzen slowly stood to his feet, looking down at the Raikage as he blew another puff of smoke from his mouth. You disappoint me, Lord Raikage. I had hoped for a better outcome to this meeting other than you making one-sided demands. A's eyebrow suddenly lifted as his face flashed with anger and his chakra suddenly burst to life. To hell with the armistices. I will end this now. The Raikage yelled, allowing his anger to get the better of him as he burst into life, jumping across the room as he went to attack the Hokage, causing both Itachi and Darui to react. Hiruzen had a bad feeling that this would happen from the start and was already prepared as he clicked his teeth together, creating a spark that suddenly ignited the smoke in the air. Burning Ash Jutsu. He said, watching as the smoke exploded in a burst of flames, forcing both the Raikage and Darui to jump back to avoid being caught in the jutsu. Ah. Kill the Hokage and don't let him escape. The Raikage yelled, causing Darui to sigh, knowing that it would come to this. If you say so, boss. Itachi, this will not be an easy battle. In the event of my death, you must escape and report back to the village. Your strength will be needed in what is to come, Hiruzen said as he suddenly pulled his Kage robes off, revealing his battle attire underneath. The explosion shook the cave from the outside, giving both of the Umbu that were waiting a bad feeling as they looked at each other, knowing what it meant. Without a word of warning, the Cloud Umbu suddenly charged at the lead Umbu commander, attacking with a kunai in each hand, aiming for his vitals. Darn it. What the hell is going on? The Leaf Umbu commander thought as he blocked the attacks, quickly countering with his own as he pulled a sword from his back to block the barrage of kunai. You Hokage have always acted high and mighty compared to the other Kage. I will show you the might of the Raikage. And finish you off for good. I said as he pulled his white robe off and suddenly allowed his lightning chakra cloak to flare to life, sending his chakra levels through the roof. Hiruzen knew all about his lightning chakra cloak as he had witnessed it firsthand from the third Raikage, knowing that he was going to be in for the fight of his life. I have no choice, summoning jutsu. Hiruzen said as he quickly made the hand signs and placed his hand onto the ground, summoning Monkey King Enma into the battle. Quickly, Enma. Adamantine staff. Hiruzen shouted, showing that he was indeed desperate to stop the Raikage's advance. Itachi watched the Raikage with his Sharingan but lost track of him in an instant as he disappeared, moving too fast for him to see. How did he? Itachi asked, watching as he reappeared, slamming a powerful punch into a square prison of adamantine staffs that the Hokage had created around himself so that A couldn't get to him. Just in time. The Hokage said as he quickly made more hand signs. Ahhh, this won't stop me. The Raikage said as he struck the ground, causing the very earth below them to shatter with lightning chakra, sending both the Hokage and Itachi flying with the debris. You could have said you were fighting against the Raikage, Hiruzen. Enma said as his eyes opened from a part of the staff, taking a look around the battlefield. Hiruzen had finished his hand signs and slapped his hands together before he landed on the ground. Earth style, Great Mud River. Hiruzen yelled as the entire floor of the cave turned into a raging mud river in a matter of seconds, threatening to flood the entire cave as it rushed towards the Reikage and Darui. Well, I didn't have time to explain. Hiruzen then said back to Enma, who was watching what was going on from his staff transformation. Darui, you deal with the Uchiha. A said as he watched the mud river rage towards them both. Yeah, I got it, Darui said, quickly making his own hand signs before A disappeared in a burst of speed, leaving only a flashing of lightning behind him. Now, fire style, dragon flame bullet. Hiruzen said as he shot out a barrage of flame bombs into the mud, causing it to set on fire and create a huge explosion that covered the whole area of the cave, leaving no gaps and nowhere to hide. Water style, water wall. Darui shouted as he expelled a large amount of water from his mouth to protect himself from the explosion that came his way, effectively wrapping himself in a huge water bubble to stop the explosion and mud river that mixed into the water, turning it brown. That should keep them busy. Quickly, Itachi, get out of this cave. Hiruzen said, watching as Itachi's face turned into shock as he saw the Reikage appear behind him with his fist pulled back ready to strike. Lightning punch. The Reikage yelled as he let his first rip, hitting right through Hiruzen's body with a powerful punch that boomed like thunder. However, the Hokage's body turned into a pile of mud, showing that he had used a substitution. Itachi followed suit and made a break for it, heading towards what was left of the exit of the cave, knowing he would have to get clear of their fight for the time being. Where are you going? Darui suddenly said as a large burst of water blocked Itachi's escape, picking him off of his feet with the force of its current. Lightning style, wave of inspiration. Darui then said as he allowed his lighting style to flow into the water, creating a strong combined jutsu, then zapped Itachi with a powerful force while the water crushed him. However, Itachi's body burst into white smoke, causing Darui to panic a little as he was sure he had trapped him. Darn it, a shadow clone. He said, knowing his guard would have to be up. Suddenly 4 blasts of water burst from the ground in the shape of drills, pulling Darui into his own water style that had flooded part of the cave. What the? Darui said as he became submerged in the water, trying to fight the jutsu before he was able to let loose a small burst of lightning-style chakra that freed him from the grip of the water, however, in doing so had shocked himself at the same time. Darui pulled himself back onto the water, taking a breath of fresh air before he stood onto the water and drew his sword, blocking a sudden attack from Itachi as he tried to clear the muddy water from his eyes. Darui looked into Itachi's eyes, seeing the red tint in them before he was pushed back by him, quickly wiping his brow with his sleeve. Damn this guy, he's only a kid and he's already this strong. He thought, gaining his balance back before he raised his sword and clapped his hands together. Storm style, laser circus. He said, allowing what looked like beams of concentrated light to form and rush towards Itachi. There is no getting away from this jutsu. Darui said with a smile on his face, watching as the light beams were about to make contact with Itachi. You may want to rethink that attack before it's too late. Itachi's voice suddenly said inside Darui's mind, causing him to realize he was inside a genjutsu. No way. He said before his own jutsu blasted into him, bursting off of his body as they exploded one at a time and sent him flying to the ground with a hard crash as his body smoked from the burns on his skin. Itachi stood on the water as he watched his handiwork before he heard another explosion come from further inside of the cave, knowing that he needed to try and help the Hokage. Hiruzen was currently trying to fight the Reikage, however, his speed was simply too much, and he was being forced to defend himself more than attack, knowing that if the Reikage could land a direct blow he would be done for. Hiruzen flipped over another of A's attacks, narrowly avoiding the punch before the Reikage vanished again, forcing Hiruzen to use a combination of Enma and Shadow clones to form the adamantine prison around him to stop the Reikage from being able to reach him with one of his strikes. You really think this cage can protect you? A yelled as he grabbed one of the bars and tried to break it away with brute force, letting his chakra flare to life. However, Enma himself suddenly grew from part of the staff and grabbed the Reikage around his waist and back, putting him in a full Nelson and holding him still. Now Hiruzen, finish him. Enma shouted, holding the Reikage tight as he tried to break free of the monkey's grip. The rest of the staffs burst into smoke as they turned into giant shuriken that surrounded the Hokage while he quickly made the hand signs causing them to start turning at a rapid rate. Your lighting cloak is impressive indeed, Reikage, but if you cannot move, you will be unable to dodge this attack. Hiruzen said as he embodied the giant shuriken wind-style chakra, knowing that lightning style was weak to wind. Agurg! A roared as he let his chakra explode, causing Enma to almost lose his grip around him, knowing he would not be able to hold onto him for long. Quickly Hiruzen, I can't hold him for long. He roared, doing his best to not let go. Go. Hiruzen said as he threw the giant shuriken, watching as they whistled through the air with the razor-sharp boost of the wind-style chakra, cutting through anything in their path as they headed towards the Reikage. I don't think so. A roared as he suddenly burst full of power, letting his lightning-style chakra cloak burst even larger, allowing him to even break free of Enma's powerful grip, forcing him back and allowing him to charge forwards. Arg! The Raikage bellowed as he hit the wind-style shuriken head-on, shattering them one after the other to prove that his strength was beyond what the Hokage would be able to handle. Lariat. A roared as he smashed the last shuriken and extended his arm, moving so fast that Hiruzen couldn't even track him with his eyes. Hiruzen was shocked that even his wind-style jutsu had failed to stop the Raikage, remembering the insane durability that his father also had while in this state. Hiruzen was called the Professor. A god of shinobi, master of over 1,000 jutsu and all of the jutsu within the Hidden Leaf. He had lived through not 3 but 4 wars now and served as the Hokage through 3 of them. But even with all of those titles and jutsu, he knew that in his old age he was no longer a match for someone like the Raikage. There is only one way to end this. It has to be that jutsu. Hiruzen said as he quickly snapped his eyes open, dropping to the ground and avoiding the Raikage's final attack, causing him to crash into the cave wall and burst out into the blizzard outside. Enma quickly. Hiruzen said, quickly grabbing his staff as Enma jumped to his side. How are we going to deal with this guy Hiruzen? He is way too powerful and fast. Enma said, trying to sense if the Raikage was coming back. Meanwhile, Itachi had been successful in defeating Dori, leaving him injured on the ground after he had hit himself with his own jutsu. Itachi had done as the Hokage had told him, quickly making him way out of the cave to see the Umbu commander struggling in his battle with the Cloud Umbu. Itachi could see that he still had the element of surprise, and pulled out a handful of kunai, throwing them into the air before he jumped into action. Fire style, Scarlet Claw. He said, throwing more shuriken that he art on fire towards the Umbu member. The Leaf Umbu commander blocked another assault and ducked under a swift kick, doing his beat to get clear so he could use ninjutsu. However, his opponent was quick, and clearly more suited to close combat, wanting to keep the fight in his lane. Suddenly the fire shuriken caught Umbu's attention, causing him to take his focus off of the lead Umbu and jump high into the air to avoid them. However, Itachi had already seen this outcome, planning ahead for it with the kunai he had thrown into the air colliding off one another to delay their trajectory and hit the Umbu as he jumped into the air at the perfect time, giving him no time to block the attack. Arg! He yelled, being stuck by 2 of the throwing knives that he couldn't avoid and falling to the ground. The Leaf Umbu commander was impressed and quickly took advantage of the situation and finished off the Cloud Umbu member, leaving his corpse lying on the ground. Where is Lord Hokage? The commander quickly asked, seeing that Itachi was standing with him and had escaped the cave. He is inside fighting against the Raikage. He told me to get out of the way, Itachi said. The commander nodded. That sounds like the Hokage. The commander said before an explosion that shook the mountain caught their attention. A battle between 2 Kage-level fighters. I'm not surprised Lord Hokage told you to get out of the way. But we need to find a way to help if we can. He spoke. Itachi agreed, looking over to where the explosion had come from. Dealing with someone like the Raikage is beyond our ability, Itachi said, already knowing he didn't have any other way than genjutsu to stop the hulking man, but given his speed, he was struggling to come up with a way to trap him, having never seen anyone move so fast before. Hiruzen was still standing in the cave, watching as the cold air from outside blew in thanks to the hole the Raikage had smashed through the cave wall. This whole place is unstable, we need to get out of here, Enma said, feeling that the cave was about to collapse around them. However, Hiruzen knew that fighting the Raikage in the open would be much more difficult than in a cave where he could make use of the environment. Alright, let's move. He then said, coming up with an idea as he dashed towards the exit and avoided the cave-in as the mountain tried to swallow him whole. As soon as Hiruzen jumped out onto the mountain, the Raikage was on him, having been waiting for him to come out from the cover of the cave, allowing him to attack him at full force. You're mine now, Hokage. A shouted, gripping the Hokage by his neck before he lifted him into the air and choke-slammed him to the ground. Hiruzen was slammed into the ground hard, knowing that he would not be able to overpower the Raikage with taijutsu as he was pinned into the ground by his neck. Don't count me out just yet. Hiruzen yelled, quickly kicking his legs up around the Raikage's arm, locking them in place as he attempted to snap the Raikage's elbow joint. However, A's muscles were far too strong for the Hokage to break his arm, simply holding him in place with pure strength. Did you think that would work on me? A yelled, lifting his arm into the air with Hiruzen still wrapped around it, smashing him into the ground again. But this time, the Hokage's body burst into smoke, transforming into Enma, who growled with a sinister smirk on his face. How about me, am I strong enough? Enma roared, suddenly gripping the Raikage with his claws as he pulled down on his arm, breaking the joint at the elbow and holding the Raikage in place. Arg! The Raikage yelled, doing his best to control the pain as his eyes glared at the Monkey King. Why you? A yelled, lifting his other arm into a knife hand position, letting it become enhanced with lighting-style chakra, clearly planning on killing Enma in one blow. Hiruzen, hurry up. Enma yelled, knowing he would have to release the summoning contract in order to avoid the Raikage's blow. I'm on it. Hiruzen shouted, forming a hand sign to create shadow clones around the Raikage in the shape of a pentagon. The Raikage watched confused as to what the Hokage was planning on doing, still fighting with Enma who held him in place. Now Enma. Hiruzen said, watching as Enma burst into smoke, taking the Raikage off guard as he turned into an unbreakable adamantine staff prison around him, trapping the Raikage inside. Do you really think this jutsu will hold me? The Raikage said, growing angry that the Hokage continued to underestimate him. On the contrary, Lord Raikage, the fact I am forced to use this technique is a testament to your strength. Now, 5-style massive combo jutsu. Hiruzen said as he and his shadow clones all formed different hand signs, each of them building up a large amount of chakra to create a powerful A-rank jutsu in the form of each element, something unseen by almost all shinobi. The Raikage knew his lighting chakra cloak offered him great defensive ability, however, he also knew that a combined jutsu that used all 5 elements of chakra nature would be no joke and didn't want to risk it. Quickly concentrating all of his power into his good arm, a burst forwards at light speed, smashing into the wall of staffs that trapped him. All of the jutsu that the Hokage used collided with one another, bursting into a high tornado of light that became engulfed by flames. Both Itachi and the Anbu commander watched from the distance, amazed at the combination of jutsu, knowing how amazing it was to see all 5 chakra natures be used with such mastery. Amazing. Itachi said as he watched with his Sharingan, knowing even with his eyes he would not be able to copy such a level of jutsu. Hiruzen watched as the dust settled, knowing that everything other than Enma should have been turned to dust thanks to that jutsu, only having survived thanks to having a density equal to that of diamonds. However, the Raikage was nowhere to be seen, leaving Hiruzen stunned as he tried to catch his breath for expelling such a large amount of chakra. Lord Hokage, look out! Itachi shouted, catching movement with his Sharingan. Hiruzen only noticed the hole in his staff prison at the last second, watching as Enma transformed back into his form, badly injured with his arm extended, trying to warn the Hokage. Arg! Liger bomb! The Raikage roared, appearing behind Hiruzen, having figured out which was the real one. Hiruzen was taken by complete surprise as the Raikage picked him up over his shoulder, leaving him helpless in the air before he dived towards the ground, about to finish him with the powerful taijutsu move. Earth-style, mudbath jutsu. The Anbu commander shouted, making his hand signs with incredible reaction time, quickly turning the ground under both Kage to soft mud, allowing the impact for the Hokage to be softened just enough for him to survive the attack. Lord Hokage! The commander yelled as he jumped to try and help him, pulling out his sword and enhancing the blade with wind style. The Raikage was confused as to why the Hokage was still alive, seeing that the ground had gone all soft. Darn it! He yelled, getting angry before he turned around to block an attack from the Anbu commander, feeling the wind-style sword sink into his flesh a little. The Raikage pushed the Anbu commander away, about to charge at him, feeling his leg get trapped as he looked down to see the Hokage holding onto his ankle. I won't let you. Hiruzen said, biting through the pain in his body. Itachi could see that this was his chance, quickly jumping in to attack the Raikage with his own sword, knowing he would block it with ease. Fool! I yelled, blocking Itachi's attack and punching him with his broken arm, sending him flying through the air before he hit the ground and rolled to his feet. Suddenly the Raikage stopped moving, seeming to lose the will to fight as he slumped down to his knees, surprising the Hokage and Anbu commander. Genjutsu success, Itachi said as he stood up, having placed the Raikage in the strongest genjutsu that he could. Not even you will be able to break free from this genjutsu so easily, Itachi said as he walked over to the Kage, looking down at Hiruzen who did his best to get back up to his feet. Lord Hokage, are you alright? The Anbu commander said as he rushed to his aid. I'm alright, thanks to Itachi. He said, impressed that he was able to trap someone like the Raikage in a genjutsu strong enough to hold him. We don't have long though, I'm not sure how long it will take him to break free from my jutsu. Itachi said, knowing that the Raikage was too strong to hold for long. We should finish him off Lord Hokage, quickly before he has a chance to counter us. The Anbu commander said, getting his sword ready. Itachi watched both of them, seeing the perfect opportunity to carry out the task his father had given him. Knowing that this would be the only moment he would get to kill someone as strong as the Hokage. The only question that remained was could he bring himself to do it. On one hand, Itachi trusted the Hokage, knowing that he would try his best to quell the uprising and anguish that the Uchiha felt towards the village. But he also knew that they had run out of time and that despite all of the Hokage's efforts, it would no longer be enough to stop a civil war. Itachi had been prepared to even kill his whole clan for the greater good of the village, being willing to go so far for his nation. But now, would he be prepared to do the same thing to the Hokage if it meant the same result? After all, the future that his father had shown him was now up to him to create, knowing that nothing else he did would result in anything different. Itachi lowered his head, feeling the weight of the whole village fall upon him before he looked into the Hokage's eyes. Forgive me, Lord Hokage. Itachi said, getting a surprised expression from the Anbu commander as he sensed what he was about to do. Itachi. Why you? He shouted, quickly trying to make a move on him and attacking with his sword. However, Itachi simply burst into crows, surprising the Anbu commander before they swarmed him, causing him to realize he was also in a genjutsu. No. When? He said, trying to think when he had been placed under genjutsu. Suddenly he remembered when Itachi had helped him defeat the Cloud Umbu, having seen that his Sharingan was active, knowing that must have been the moment he had cast it. "Curse you," he said before he fell onto the ground, falling unconscious and leaving only Hiruzen and Itachi. Hiruzen was impressed by Itachi once more, seeing how effectively he used his Sharingan and his sharp mind. "So, it has come to this," Hiruzen said, having known that something was going to happen sooner or later. "I wish I could do this another way. I had hoped for more time," Itachi said, getting a slow nod from Hiruzen. "Yes. Time is the one thing that escapes us all." Itachi could see that Hiruzen wasn't going to fight him, and was a little confused as to why. "I understand, Itachi. You truly are a kind child and a true shinobi," Hiruzen said, even going as far as to praise him. "Even at such a young age, you were able to place the needs of the village above the needs of one's own emotions, truly inheriting the will of fire and acting like a Kage would. That is why, if my death will bring peace to the Uchiha and allow the village to grow stronger, then I welcome it like an old friend," he said, extending his arms to Itachi. "Just promise me one thing," he said, getting a nod from Itachi. "Promise me that you will keep the village safe, no matter who it is that threatens it. Even if that person is of your own blood, promise me you will protect the leaf and her people," the Hokage said, looking into Itachi's eyes with a burning flame in his own. "If you can promise me that, then I will gladly give you my life," he then said, causing tears to flow from Itachi's eyes. "Do not fear it, Itachi. For this is the path you have the choice to bring peace to our village," Hiruzen said, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder to help put him at ease. Suddenly Hiruzen pushed Itachi back, taking him off guard as he watched the Raikage appear with his Sharingan, knowing that his attack would have killed him if not for the Hokage. "Die!" A roared at the top of his lungs, smashing his arm with a powerful lariat into the Hokage's chest, ripping his chest open from the force of it. "Lord Hokage!" Itachi yelled at the top of his lungs, watching the small smile that formed on his face, whispering something with the last of his breath, knowing that Itachi would be able to read his lips with his eyes. "In the end, I'm glad it wasn't you that had to bear this burden. Live well, Itachi, when the tree leaves dance, one shall find flames. The fire's shadow will illuminate the village, and once again, tree leaves shall bud anew," he whispered in his final moment, knowing that Itachi would understand his words. Hiruzen's body smashed into the ground as the Raikage burst through him, skidding to a halt from the force he had put into his attack, looking down at his handiwork. "That attack was meant for you, Uchiha brat," he said, wiping the blood from his arm. "But the Hokage's death is just as good." Itachi looked at the body of the Hokage, feeling the twisting of such intense emotions that he didn't know how to come with it. "That was a powerful genjutsu, I have to hand it to you. It took me a while to escape that little jutsu of yours, brat. But it won't work on me again." Itachi could feel the pain in his heart at what had happened. Even after he was about to kill the Hokage, he had still sacrificed himself for Itachi, proving that his love for the village came above everything else, including his own life. Watched as Itachi opened his eyes, seeing that the pattern of his Sharingan had changed. "What is that?" he asked, having never seen anything like that before. "Lord Raikage," Darui shouted, landing next to his leader, looking to be in bad shape. "So, you're still alive?" said, not impressed that he had been defeated. "Yeah, kid caught me in a genjutsu," Darui said, feeling embarrassed as he held his arm with his good side. "Me too," the Raikage said, letting Darui know he wasn't the only one. "Don't look into his eyes," the Raikage said. Itachi could feel the power that his eyes had unlocked, knowing that this could be only one thing. "The Manjikyu Sharingan," he said, suddenly activating his right eye. Sensed something coming his way and suddenly dashed out of the way, using his speed to avoid a burst of black flames that hit the mountainside behind him, also causing Dori to also be shocked at what happened. "What the hell is that?" Dori asked, quickly jumping out of the way of the fire. Quickly appeared next to Itachi with his arm raised over his head, about to slam a hammer fist down onto him and finish the fight once and for all. However, both of Itachi's eyes glowed to life, forming a red skeleton around his body that grabbed the Raikage's fist, blocking the attack even at full power. "What is this?" said, watching as the skeleton grew larger and even started to form muscles and then what looked like skin over its body. Darui also watched, not understanding what was going on. "No way. I'm not letting you get away with this," he said, quickly making some hand signs as he generated lightning around his body, turning it black with his final hand sign. "Lighting style, double Black Panther." Dori yelled over the thunder of his jutsu, watching as the lighting formed into two Black Panthers, gripping Itachi's Susanoo by the neck as they tried to pin it to the ground. "So, this is the Susanoo," Itachi said, feeling blood run from his right eye as he allowed it to grow, even more, watching as it became cased in armor, breaking free from the black lightning jutsu. "No way. Dori said, watching as Itachi broke free from his most powerful jutsu with ease. The Raikage was also shocked, knowing how strong the black lightning jutsu was. What the hell is that thing? He said, knowing he would need to use all of his power to try and defeat it. Itachi allowed his Susanoo to create what looked like beads in its hands, throwing them at Darui knowing he would not be able to avoid the attack. Look out. A said, quickly appearing as he moved Darui out of the way, watching as the Yasaka beads exploded against the mountain. Lord Raikage, we should retreat, Darui said, knowing that he was no match for the Uchiha and would only slow the Raikage down. Darn it. A said, knowing that he was right. Alright, let's get out of here. We did what we came here to do. He said, settling for the death of the Hokage. This battle isn't over, Uchiha. I yelled, watching the boy carefully as he stood inside of his Susanoo, watching both of them. With that the Raikage and Darui retreated, leaving Itachi alone on the mountain in the snowstorm. Allowing him to let his Susanoo fade and rest his eyes before he dropped to the ground, feeling pain radiate throughout his entire body. Fuyona finished reading the report that the scouts had given, seeing that it was the Raikage that had killed the Hokage and declared war upon them. Fuyona placed the scroll down onto the table, trying to hold his anger in at what the Raikage had done, knowing that if he had killed him, this wouldn't have happened. Fuyona. Are you okay? Mei asked, seeing that he wasn't. I'm fine. If it is a war that the Raikage wants, then a war he shall get. Fuyona said as he stood up tall, making his mind up and giving the order to begin the preparation. Alright, that's the end of this chapter. I hope it was worth the wait. This one took me a while to write, but it was worth it. Chapter 129, Chapter 129. The news had spread quickly that the Hokage had been killed at the hands of the Raikage. The Hidden Leaf and Land of Fire were in an uproar with the whole thing, with war longing on the horizon. With both Hiruzen and Danzo dead, the elders of the village were the last of a generation, finding that the choice of whom to appoint as the next Hokage fell upon their shoulders. Itachi had been the only one to return to the village, which certainly raised suspicion regarding his survival. However, once the Raikage took credit for the Hokage's death, the village quickly believed Itachi's story and released him from holding, without further questioning. Fugaku was waiting for his son to return home knowing that he had been released from questioning and having heard the story of what had happened from his subordinates. Now that the Hokage was out of the way he could set his plan into motion. Fugaku knew that the only others who would make a suitable Hokage at the moment were Jiraiya and Lady Tsunade, both of who had seemed to have no interest in the position and were currently away from the village. Come in, son, Fugaku said, sensing his son's presence coming from outside of the room. Itachi did as his father asked and opened the door to enter the room. Fugaku watched him and waited for him to sit down, not sensing any ill will from the boy. I see your mission was a success, even if it didn't go to plan, Fugaku said, getting a slow nod from Itachi. Fugaku could feel that his son was different now, seeming to have changed in some way. What happened? Tell me everything, Itachi, Fugaku said, getting the sense he had unlocked a new power. Meanwhile in the village hidden in the mist. Fuyona had first received the news from his spies about what had transpired between the Raikage and the Hokage, resulting in the death of the Hokage. Later the statement had come from the Raikage himself, declaring that the Hidden Cloud would be joining the Hidden Stone to face the Leaf and the Mist, starting with the death of the Hokage. Fuyona couldn't help but worry, now that the Cloud had joined the war against them would mean an even greater army to battle against. But Fuyona also knew that with the death of the Hokage, there would be the question of who would become the fifth, and would they uphold the alliance that he had created with the third. Are you all right, dear? Mei asked, noticing that Fuyona was still awake as she rolled over to hold him, distracting him from his train of thought. Suiren was fast asleep on the other side of Fuyona while Mei rolled over to cuddle with him, noticing he was still awake. Fuyona flashed a small smile at her, stroking her hair with his free hand. I'm fine, Mei, just a lot on my mind is all. He said, trying not to worry her. Mei nodded and placed her head on his chest, stroking it with her nails. Fuyona smiled and relaxed, continuing to stroke her hair with his hand as he tried to relax and allow his mind to rest somewhat. Morning came quickly and Fuyona knew that there would be plenty of work already waiting for him. The village had taken a hit to its manpower in the last conflict between the sand and the stone, and Fuyona knew he would be forced to use more now that the Cloud were involved. He was worried this might happen. After the events with the Three Tails and his battle against the Raikage, he knew something like this would be a possibility. Still, worrying about that now would get him nowhere and instead he decided to focus on the task at hand. Once Fuyona had breakfast with his family, he headed to the office, where he could start making preparations for the war. The war had tenacity never ended, with the stone refusing to surrender, whereas the sand had done so, especially once they found out that Pakura, the fifth Kazekage had been under the influence of a powerful Genjutsu. Once again, however, Fuyona would be forced to place the village on high alert, and utilize everyone that was available to keep it safe. He had spies running around the world keeping tabs on other nations, just as they did on him. He had tracker ninja out trying to hunt down any deserters, which thankfully had been very few once he had taken leadership. He had patrols, escorts for trades, messengers, and the normal shinobi out on missions trying to keep what was a large part of the economy of the village alive. All of it added up and he was running short on manpower. He had also started the training for Haku, Kimimaro, and the others, knowing that their skills and abilities once honed would become essential to boosting the village's power. Haku having a razor-sharp intellect and the ice release. Kimimaro, who was a taijutsu genius, was gifted with the Shikatsumiyaku and also possessed the three tails inside of him, meaning once he mastered its power, he would become a very powerful shinobi indeed. Then there was Koyuki, the daughter of Yagura, the former Mizukage. She was also a gifted shinobi and would prove to become a significant one just like her father. Next was Hattori, gifted with not one but two Kekkei Genkai, just like himself. He is the last heir to his family, a noble of the land of water and a talented fighter for his age, giving both Haku and Kimimaro a serious run for their money during the Chunin exams. The others in their class such as Kujira, Chika, and many more that had survived the Chunin exams were also talented in their own right, proving to be strong enough to be the next generation of shinobi that would run this village. For now, Fuyona would prioritize their training and try to keep them away from the war front as best he could. Still, he was sure that their time to fight would come soon enough, no matter what he did. Not only that, but Fuyona also had more and more genin that were being trained up, requiring more and more chunin and jonin to be placed in charge of them, further taking away from his manpower as he wished to keep them out of combat for as long as possible. Ao suddenly walked into Fiona's office, snapping him out of his thoughts as he spoke. "Sir, we have a message from the Leaf regarding their choice for the next Hokage," Ao said, handing Fuyona the scroll. Fuyona picked up the scroll, reading it and seeing that he had been requested to attend the meeting, something that had never happened before in the history of the Leaf. "Why would they want me there?" he asked, not sure of the reason. Ao also questioned it, not sure of what to say. "Do you think it's a trap?" Ao asked, crossing his arms over his chest. "I would hope not," Fuyona said, showing a goofy smile as he leaned back in his chair. "If the Leaf would stoop so low as to betray us after the death of the third Hokage, then they are not worth saving from the other nations," Fuyona said, growing serious again. "So what are you going to do?" Ao asked, knowing that look on his face. "Well, I'm going to attend the meeting of course," he simply said, tapping on the desk. "I thought as much," Ao said, not impressed. "I take it you're going alone too?" he then asked, already knowing the answer. "Wait, let me guess. It will be easier that way," Ao then said, taking the words out of Fiona's mouth. "You read my mind," he said with a large grin, causing Ao to sigh. "Mei and Suiren won't be happy about that, you know," Ao then said, knowing he would be getting an earful from Fiona's wives. "Leave them to me, Ao," Fuyona then said, also chuckling nervously. Back in the Leaf, the village elders were currently preparing the funeral of the third Hokage, while also trying to come up with a list of who they could appoint as the next Hokage. As per the 3RD's will and instructions upon his death, he had requested their ally, the Mizukage, be present during the meeting so that he could meet the new Hokage and help keep their alliance alive. "Hiruzen, you fool," one of the elders said as she read his will. "He places too much trust in the Mizukage," she then said, looking to the other elder, who also read a copy. "I agree. However, he has proven to be very useful. Not only helping to boost our village's economy with trade but also help prevent a civil war with the Uchiha and bring the war to a halt," he said, seeming to weigh up his feats. The female elder remained quiet as she couldn't argue with the facts. "He also killed Danzo," she said, not looking happy about it. "Yes, the death of Danzo was a shame. Although he didn't go about it in the best way, he always did everything he could for the village, no matter how dark. Yes. I wonder what he would do if he were still alive now," the female elder said, knowing he would not want the Mizukage in the meeting. "I agreed with him when he opposed the alliance," she also said, getting a surprised look from her partner. "Are you saying what I think you are?" he asked. "I'm only saying that we could have avoided all of this if we had not joined with the mist," she said, getting a small nod from the other. A small moment of silence passed before either of them spoke again. "Anyway, let us send the information for the meeting," she said after a moment, knowing they would have to honor the Hokage's will. The news had now spread, and the elders of the village had placed the time of the meeting. The daimyo of the Land of Fire would also be attending, along with the other elders and heads of clans of the village. After all, it was a very serious thing, electing a new Hokage, and given they were also at war, they would be taking no chances. The day of the Hokage's funeral had arrived, and Fuyona was ready to head out, showing that he and the village of the mist were also paying their respects. Fuyona slipped out of an ice mirror that led him to the office of one of the elders, allowing him to knock on the door. "Yes, come in," the voice said. Fuyona did just that and got a surprising jolt as the elder realized who it was. "El Lord Mizukage," he said, not expecting him to arrive at his office. Yes, sorry for the intrusion, but I thought it would be best to turn up here rather than at the village gates, Fuyona said, watching as the elder calmed down. I see. He said, understanding what he meant. Very well. I was just about to leave myself if you would like to accompany me. He said, inviting Fuyona to come with him. Fuyona nodded and followed the elder out of his office, also surprising more of the Jonin guard that had been guarding the building, clearly clueless to his arrival. Fuyona walked out onto the roof of the Hokage's mansion, seeing that the whole village was starting to line up so that they could pay their respects to the former Hokage. Fuyona could make out everyone who was important, such as all of the heads of the clans, including Fugaku, who stood with Itachi at the head of the Uchiha clan. His presence was not so unusual considering their alliance and Fiona's efforts in the war, helping to save many Leaf Shinobi. The elder stepped forwards as he gained everyone's attention, speaking a few words to the village and honoring the memory of the third Hokage, causing everyone to become emotional. Fuyona kept his sight on the village, looking at its people as they sobbed and mourned for their leader, wondering if his own would do the same for him. Fuyona remained there as he waited for the whole village to pay their respects, being the last of the village leaders to remain, showing his respect above all else, something that did not go unnoticed by the village. 1 week later. Now that the village had mourned the death of the Hokage, the meeting to elect the next one had arrived, meaning that Fuyona would be traveling back to the Leaf Village once again. Over the last week, he had spent his time training Kimimaro and the others, helping them to control their abilities and setting them new goals to which they would have to aspire to. Fuyona appointed Mei, Kaga, and Ganryu to oversee their training while he was gone, knowing that they would be more than ruthless with them, as he had asked them to be. With his affairs in order, and leaving Ao to tend to the rest, Fuyona had prepared to attend the meeting to elect a new Hokage. Do you have everything with you? Are you sure you don't want to take someone with you? Mei said, knowing that he should at least take an Umbu guard with him. Please Mei, I will be fine, Fuyona said, reassuring her for the 10th time that he would be alright. But what if it's a trap? Suiren also said, crossing her arms as she leaned onto the desk. Ao was also present in his office but chose to remain silent, having already had this conversation with him. Please, Suiren. Like I said, even if it is a trap, it would be better if I am alone. He said with a smile, trying to put both of his wives at ease. Mei sighed, knowing that there was no arguing with him over this. Fine. But if anything happens, you get out of there. She said, taking his hand seeming worried about him. Don't worry about me, like I said, we can trust the Leaf. He said, trying to push the small amount of doubt he had to the back of his mind. Alright, wish me luck, Fuyona said as he kissed both Suiren and Mei on the forehead before looking at Ao. Be careful. Ao finally said, giving Fuyona a nod. You know me, I always make it out alive, Fuyona said, flashing them all a smile before he clicked his fingers to create an ice mirror. See you all soon. He then said, walking into the mirror, leaving the three of them inside the office alone, waiting for his return. Fuyona stepped out of his ice mirror, leaving him just a little outside of the village gates, this time deciding to enter the village in disguise, deciding he would scope the place out first to see what feeling he got from it. Since Fuyona had used his ice mirror to enter inside the barrier that was placed around the village, he had already passed through undetected, allowing him to transform into a hidden leaf Chunin. Fuyona walked into the crowd that was passing into the village, mixing among the traders and other civilians that were going about their business before he caught the eye of one of the gate guards. Evening, you back from a mission? He asked. Yeah, just finished now. He said, flashing a smile. Good, well get some rest. The gate guard said, turning his attention back to the others. See ya, Fuyona said, entering the village with relative ease as he placed his hands into his pockets. Well, that was easy. I guess I should head to the meeting, but I still have an hour to kill yet. He thought as he tried to think what he should do. I guess I'll just wander and see what happens. He said to himself, wondering if he would bump into anyone interesting before he skipped alone and hummed a tune to himself. Alright, that's the end of this chapter. Once again thank you for the wait. I hope you enjoy. Chapter 130, Enter the Toad Sage. Fuyona had snuck into the hidden leaf village under the disguise of an ordinary Chunin-level ninja, easily slipping through the main gate of the village without detection. That was too easy. I guess now, the only question is what should I do first? He asked himself, looking around the streets at the different people that were going about their business, feeling excited that he was able to explore the hidden leaf village again. No one suspected anything out of the ordinary as Fuyona made his way around, stopping to look at the odd shops, trinkets and wares. Even the Umbu Black Ops that kept an eye on the daily innings of the village had been fooled by him, seeing no reason to suspect his transformation jutsu as they monitored the village with their cameras. Fuyona headed down another street looking at some of the unique things that one could only find here in the Land of Fire, before his nose caught a whiff of some amazing smelling food, deciding to follow his nose like a dog. Following his nose, he turned down another street, getting a strange look from some girls as he seemed to be walking strangely while following the scent, sniffing the air as he did so. Soon enough, Fiona found himself outside of the famous Ichiraku ramen shop, amazed at how it looked in person, realizing he had never seen it since being in this world. "No way," he said, looking at it in all of its glory. Fiona slowly walked towards the curtains and brushed his hand into them, pushing them out of the way as he entered the shop. "Welcome," a friendly voice said, greeting Fiona. Fiona could see that it was the man himself, busy cooking his noodles as he was usually doing in the anime. "Hello," Fiona said, taking a seat, not being able to resist the draw of the food. "How can I help you, friend? Here for some food?" the man asked, looking at Fiona with a smile. "One bowl of ramen please," Fiona suddenly said, getting a nod from the owner of the store. "Of course, coming right up," he said, flipping the noodles before he started to cook the food, slicing and dicing everything with great skill and care. Fiona licked his lips as his mouth watered, thinking about all the times he had watched this moment and dreamed of experiencing it, knowing it was a childhood dream of his as his stomach growled at him. Some time passed as Fiona continued to wait for his food, thinking about the meeting that he would be going to soon. Suddenly a familiar voice sounded in his ears as a blonde-haired boy ran into the shop, seeming short of breath. "Give me one bowl, old man," he shouted, slapping his money down onto the table looking excited. Fiona instantly recognized the boy, knowing him all too well. "Ah, Naruto. One bowl coming right up," the owner of the store said again, showing no animosity towards him as the other villagers would have. Fiona looked over at Naruto, seeing that he had grown a little since the last time he had seen him, knowing that he wouldn't recognize him while he was in disguise. "Hey mister, what you are looking at?" Naruto suddenly said, seeing that Fiona was looking at him. "Oh, nothing," Fiona said, flashing him a smile, trying to bat it off as nothing. "Come here often?" Fiona then asked, getting a questioning look from the boy. "Why yeah," Naruto said, surprised that somebody would speak to him. Fiona smiled at him before the owner placed down both of their bowls. "There you go, enjoy," he said, distracting them both with the amazing-looking bowl of ramen. "Oh boy, it looks amazing," Naruto said, quickly breaking his chopsticks and tucking into his food. Fiona watched and smiled before he did the same, looking at the perfectly presented food before taking his first bite of the famous Ichiraku ramen, feeling his taste buds explode with flavor. "It's as good as I imagined," Fiona thought, quickly taking another bite and another until he finished off the whole bowl in a matter of moments. "Argman, that was good," he said, placing the empty bowl back down on the table. Naruto did the same, licking his lips as he slammed the bowl down before taking a huge breath. Fiona could see why he loved this place so much, enjoying the food very much. Suddenly, Fiona listened to a loud growling sound that seemed to come from Naruto's stomach, signaling that he was still hungry. Naruto looked a little embarrassed as he checked his little frog wallet, seeing that he didn't have enough money for another bowl, looking more than sad about it. "Here, another bowl for the kid," Fiona said to the owner, placing the money down for him. "Ah really?" Naruto asked, surprised that he would pay for his food. "But why?" "Hey, don't sweat it, kid. My treat, all right," Fiona said, not taking no for an answer, watching as the kid's face lit up with happiness. The owner placed another bowl for Naruto, also smiling at him, giving Fiona a small nod in gratitude. With that, Fiona slowly stood to his feet and waved at the two of them. "I have to go, but thanks for the food," he said, getting a surprised look from Naruto as he even stopped eating. Thanks," Naruto then shouted, tucking back into the ramen after he waved goodbye. Fiona walked off down the street, feeling very satisfied with his food, and also happy that he had seen Naruto again. "I should defiantly speak to him about opening a shop in my village," Fiona thought, laughing to himself about the idea. "Ensure it would be a huge hit," he then said, laughing out loud. Suddenly, Fiona felt a powerful presence coming from not far ahead of where he was, feeling that somebody was indeed watching him. Fiona turned the corner, feeling that whoever it was only around the other side of it, knowing he would come face to face with whoever it was in a second. "Has someone clocked onto me already?" he thought, finally turning and getting a good look at the men who had been watching him. Fiona was very surprised once he got a good look at who it was, instantly recognizing the waist-length, spiky white hair that was tied back in a ponytail, with two shoulder-length bangs framing his face, complete with the custom forehead protector with the kanji for oil on it. "Jiraiya," Fiona thought, trying to keep his surprise to himself. "Hey, you," Jiraiya said, standing in front of Fiona as he crossed his arms over his chest. Fiona stopped in his tracks as he looked at Jiraiya, seeing that he was not going to let him pass. "Can I help you, Master Jiraiya?" Fiona said, trying to blend. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow, surprised that he knew who he was. "Ah, so you know who I am," he said, taking a good look at Fiona as he looked him up and down. "And as to answer your question, yes, you can help me," he said. "In fact, you can tell me why you have such an interest in Naruto." Jiraiya suddenly said with a serious expression. Fuyona smiled nervously, waving his hands in the air. He looked hungry. I felt bad for the lad was all, seeing as he couldn't afford another bowl of that delicious ramen, Fuyona said, trying to dodge the question. I think it's time you released your transformation jutsu. Jiraiya suddenly said, not buying his story and having already seen through his jutsu. Fuyona sighed and slowly lifted his arms. I guess the gig is up then. He then said, slowly raising his hand so as not to cause any unwanted reaction as he released his jutsu, bursting into smoke. You. Jiraiya said in surprise, seeing Fiona's true form. The Mizukage. He then said, watching as Fuyona nodded to him, giving him a reassuring smile. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Jiraiya, Fuyona said, also getting a smile from the Toad Sage. Well, I've certainly heard a lot about you, Lord Mizukage. A lot indeed. Short chapter but more on the way soon. Thank you for reading and all of you amazing readers' support. Have a great day. Chapter 131, Chapter 131, the fifth Hokage is. Both Fuyona and Jiraiya stared at one another, seeming to have entered an unwilling showdown as they each weighed one another up. I take it you are here for the selection of the next Hokage. Jiraiya then asked, seeming to break the silence, already knowing that he was expected. Fuyona was glad he did as he was falling short of jokes he could use to try and break the ice between them. That's right, I am, Fuyona said with a smile. Then why the need for a disguise? You know full well you can enter the village without one. As per the alliance agreement, if anything, it makes it seem as if you are up to no good, Jiraiya said, keeping his arms crossed over his chest. Please, I simply wanted to take a small stroll through the village and eat without drawing any attention. Is that a crime? Fuyona asked, playing the innocent card. No. But why the interest in Naruto? Jiraiya then asked, not missing a thing. Fuyona could tell right away that the boy meant a lot to him, even though they had yet to meet. Fuyona sighed before he pointed down to his stomach. I think you know why. He then said, getting a questioning look. It's simple really, we Jinchuriki tend to look out for our own, Fuyona said, seeming to give him an appropriate answer. Is that right? Jiraiya said, sensing no ill will in his words. Alright then, how about we head to the meeting together? Jiraiya then asked, meaning it not so he could keep an eye on him, but so they could chat a little. Fuyona picked up on that right away, nodding to him. Of course, it would be my pleasure, Fuyona said in response, extending his hand for the Toad Sage to lead the way. With that, both of the sages, unknowing to Jiraiya of course, headed towards where the secret meeting would be taking place to decide the next Hokage. Fuyona could tell that he had questions regarding the alliance, and what he planned to do about the war with the stone and cloud. You must know that the only reason we are at war is because of the alliance that you and the third Hokage entered into. He said, stating the obvious. Fuyona sighed, nodding his head. I am. Both I and Hiruzen had discussed the issue many times over, however, neither of us was willing to break the alliance due to the disagreement or views of others. However, with his death now I am not so sure it could be for the best. Fuyona said bluntly. Jiraiya was impressed by Fiona's honesty and seemed to relax a little, coming to understand that he was the man that the third had said he was, having a small flashback to when his teacher had told him about it. Flashback. Jiraiya had returned to the village after the first battle against the Sand, having only found out about the war on one of his adventures traveling around the world. He had naturally returned to the Leaf Village, hoping that he would be able to help and see his old master. Well, looks like you've certainly aged, Sensei, Jiraiya said, sitting on the windowsill with his arms crossed as the third Hokage sat smoking his pipe. The Hokage had known he was there the whole time and simply smiled. To what do I owe the pleasure? I didn't think I would see you back so soon, Jiraiya. Hiruzen said, turning to face his old student. Well, I simply thought I would pop in for a visit, after all, it had been quite a few years. The Toad Sage said, coming through the window and into the office. It has indeed, Hiruzen said, turning to look at his old student, feeling proud of him. I'm glad you stopped by, Jiraiya. In fact, there are some things I would like to discuss with you. He said, offering Jiraiya a seat. Well, I gathered that by what's going on. He said, suddenly getting serious. Another war. And forming an alliance with the Mist. What exactly has been going on while I have been away? Hiruzen chuckled a little, seeming to let the seriousness of the conversation disappear before he took a seat. Listen carefully, Jiraiya. There are some things I need you to do for me if anything should happen. End of flashback. Giving that, I believe that it is too late for that now. I highly doubt that even if you did break your alliance with us that the Stone and Cloud would cease their war effort. Jiraiya said, scratching his chin. Fuyona had to agree, knowing that they had wanted an excuse for war for some time, knowing that it only generated income and wealth for the already wealthy of their nation. The two of them continued to chat about the political views of their villages, seeming to come to a better understanding of one another, as they both walked towards the meeting. Soon enough they had arrived, seeming to have lost track of time with their chatting. Well, looks as if we have arrived, Jiraiya said, seeing the Umbu guard around the perimeter, even though they did their best to conceal themselves. It would appear so, Fuyona said, also clocking the amount of security. Please, after you, Jiraiya said, extending his hand for Fuyona to go first. Fuyona accepted, not getting any sense of danger from him or his surroundings, and walked towards the entrance. Once inside, they were greeted by more guards, members of the Federal Lord's personal squad, called the 12 Guardian Ninja, made apparent thanks to the sash of cloth they each were bearing the kanji for fire on it. Welcome, Lord Mizuki and Master Jiraiya. One of them said. Fuyona didn't recognize either of them but greeted them all the same. Please come inside. They then said after verifying their identity. Fuyona did just that, walking into the main meeting room to see that many of the members had already arrived, including the feudal lord, the head of the Nara and Yamanaka clan, the Aburame clan, the Akimichi clan, and members of the elders and the head of the Umbu Black Ops. Well, it looks like almost everyone is here, Jiraiya said, greeting everyone that was worth greeting. Fuyona couldn't help but notice the dirty looks he was getting. However, he proceeded to his seat at one of the heads of the table with the feudal lord, being the only Kage in the room, of course. Soon enough, the head of the Hyuga clan entered the room, also taking his seat along with a few of the final elders who had arrived after him, leaving only one person left. Suddenly the door opened and everyone in the room was alerted to the presence of one man, all of their eyes being drawn to him. Ah. Fugaku, glad you could make it. Hamura, one of the head elders said, greeting him. Thank you, I do apologize that I am late. Fugaku then said, walking into the room, being accompanied by his son, Itachi, who took his place, standing behind his father. Fuyona and Itachi's eyes meet, with Fuyona nodding his head ever so slightly to the young Uchiha, getting a small greeting back. Very well. Now that everyone is here, we can start the meeting to select the next Hokage. Koharu, the other head elder, said as she stood beside Hamura. All of the heads of the village and their clans were now present in the meeting, along with the fire daimyo, and one of the legendary Sannin, the Toad Sage himself, who all agreed that they could start the meeting. First off, I would like to welcome the Mizuki to this meeting, seeing that it was the wish of the third Hokage that he be here today as we select the next Hokage, Hamura said, trying to clear the air a little. Everyone remained silent but greeted him with a small bow of their heads, knowing his reputation and power, demanding respect in its own right, even if he had been requested by the late Hokage. I would also like to welcome each of you personally, as you know. The death of the third Hokage at the hands of the Raikage was a shock to us all. He went on to say, flashing a quick glance over to Itachi before he took a breather. However, you are here today because you are the leaders of our great village, giving our people a voice and helping to guide it. Therefore, the choice and candidates of who will become the next Hokage is ultimately down to you. He said, finishing his piece before he allowed Koharu to say her part. With that said, I am sure that each of you will have your own opinion on who you would like to put forwards as the next candidate, so let us not waste any time. She then said, leaving the floor open for them to speak. Before we start, is it really alright that the Mizuki be here? I understand the third wished it so, but to have a foreign Kage present in this meeting. Inoichi Yamanaka said, keeping his arms crossed. That's enough, Inoichi. Shikaku Nara said, keeping his arms crossed over his chest. It's a drag, but the will of the Hokage is not something for us to deny, Shikaku then said, seeming to bring the argument to a close with one sentence. Fuyona agreed with him, knowing that Ao and the others would feel the same if the situation was reversed. However, Fuyona simply sat and remained quiet, deciding it would be best if he said nothing for now. Inoichi sat back against his chair and frowned, keeping quiet now that Shikaku had said his piece about it. Very well. On to the matter at hand. Koharu then said, seeing that no one else had anything to say about the matter. The daimyo was busy fanning himself, paying no notice to the small bickering that had been taking place before he closed his fan and placed it down. Yes, let us move on to business then. Who are the candidates for the next Hokage? He asked, seeming to want to hurry things along. Shikaku slowly stood from his seat, being the Jonin commander of the village. I put forwards Master Jiraiya for the position of Hokage. He said, seeming to get many who agreed with him. Yes, the student of the third Hokage, and master of the fourth. An excellent choice. The daimyo said, looking at him. I'm afraid I have to decline the offer. Jiraiya suddenly said, getting a strange look from everyone. I'm not really cut out to be Hokage. He simply said, waving his hand as he seemed to bat the idea off. But Master Jiraiya, if not you then who? Inoichi said, also agreeing he was best suited for the role of Hokage. Jiraiya looked over towards the elders and then back to the heads of clans who sat around the table. There is only one man here who is strong enough to lead the village through another war, Jiraiya said, looking over to Fugaku, who remained quiet, knowing that his name would have been brought up. I nominate Fugaku Uchiha. Jiraiya then said, getting a small gasp from the elders. Ah yes, Fugaku Uchiha. I do believe your name was brought up when trying to decide on who the fourth Hokage would be. The daimyo said, his memory clicking. Everyone in the room knew that Fugaku was the only other person in the room that was on the same level as Jiraiya, and for his recommendation to come from the Toad Sage himself, well, no one could argue with that. What about Lady Tsunade? Surely she should be considered. Kohara said, knowing that Danzo would be turning in his grave if one of the Uchiha became the next Hokage. However, Jiraiya sighed. Tsunade could be a good pick to become the next Hokage. But like me, she currently has no interest in this war or the position of Hokage. That is the reason that I nominate Fugaku. Jiraiya said, placing his counterargument. Well, you will find no argument from me. The daimyo said, happy to make the decision. What do you think, Lord Mizukage? Jiraiya then asked, seeming to surprise everyone else in the room. Fuyona could feel all eyes on him as they waited for a response. He had been watching carefully, trying to sense if anything felt off, or afoot. Knowing that Danzo had used Genjutsu to get his way in the 5 Kage summit, hoping that Fugaku wouldn't try the same thing. I was asked by the third Hokage to be here today, not only to honor our friendship and alliance but to also ensure that the next Hokage and I would see eye to eye. Therefore, I would be honored to recommend Fugaku Uchiha to become the 5th Hokage, just as Jiraiya has. Fuyona said. Very well, it's settled then. The daimyo said as he clapped his hands together. Unless anyone has anything else to add. He then said, seeing that not everyone seemed happy about the decision. No sir, I think I speak for all of us in welcoming Fugaku as the next Hokage. Shikaka suddenly said, getting a slow nod from the others, not waiting to argue amongst themselves in front of the daimyo, including the elders. Very well. I shall see you on the day of his coronation. The daimyo then said with a cheerful tone, standing to his feet, causing everyone else in the room to stand and pay their respects to him. Once the daimyo left, everyone else in the room sat back down, looking over to Fugaku as he stood. Before any of you say anything, I already understand the history between the village and the Uchiha clan. Please, allow me to reassure you that I will do everything in my power to protect this village, our village. The village that we all worked so hard to build together, from anyone that threatens it, by any means necessary. Fugaku said, causing everyone in the room to listen to his inspiring words. I understand that the clan and village have not always seen eye to eye, but as one of the founding clans of our village, and the first Uchiha to take the title of Hokage, I will let nothing stand in my way to obtain peace, no matter what. He then said, looking into Fiona's eyes for a moment. No one dared to say anything back, knowing that they could not argue with his devotion to the village. Doing so would only make them look jealous of wanting the position for themselves. Very well. It is decided then. Hamura said, getting a nod from the other elders in the room. Fugaku Uchiha. You will be the 5th Hokage. Alright, that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it and as always have a great day. Chapter 132, Chapter 132. Fugaku Uchiha. You will become the 5th Hokage. Hamura said, getting an agreed nod from the rest of the elders. No one else had any objections, also agreeing with the decision. Very well, I thank you for your consideration, Fugaku said, keeping his arms crossed over his chest, trying not to give away any emotion. It's settled then. Jiraiya then said, seeming happy with the decision. Fuyona was also pleased, not being able to think of anyone else who would be better suited to the job, as it was way too early for Tsunade to take the mantle. Very well, this meeting is hereby adjourned. Kohara then said, causing everyone to stand up and bow their heads in respect towards the new Hokage. Fuyona watched as everyone started to leave, feeling that his time in the Leaf Village was over. Lord Mizukage, do you have a minute? Fugaku of all people suddenly asked. Fuyona was a little surprised but agreed nonetheless. Of course. He said. You too, if you wouldn't mind, Lord Jiraiya. Fugaku then said, looking over at the Toad Sage. Jiraiya simply nodded and waited for everyone else to leave the room, leaving only Fugaku, Itachi, Jiraiya, and Fuyona. Fugaku waited until they were alone before he spoke, looking into Fiona's eyes. I wanted to discuss our alliance. He suddenly said, being blunt. What of it? Fuyona asked, raising an eyebrow. The Mist and the Leaf are allies, sworn to defend one another from threats, are they not? Fugaku asked. Fuyona waited for him to finish, trying to see where Fugaku was going with this. Now that the Reikage has taken credit for the death of Lord Third, I feel that it is only right for us to launch an all-out assault against the Cloud and the Reikage. And I want your support to do it. An all-out assault? Jiraiya asked, not liking the idea. Yes. I want to put on a show of force and take out the Cloud for what they did. Fugaku said, interlocking his fingers. But father, wouldn't that only cause more unnecessary causalities? Itachi asked. Fuyona could see that Itachi seemed to lean towards the side of Jiraiya, not liking the idea of committing troops to such a cause, knowing that the outcome would result in many of them dead. Are you saying that you would rather sit by and let the Reikage get away with killing our Hokage? Fugaku asked, seeing the look on their faces. I agree. Fiona suddenly said, breaking the silence. We should show the other nations why they should fear us. Fiona then said, seeming to take a darker approach to the situation. Perhaps the third and I took too soft an approach to this war. He then said, getting a questioning look from Jiraiya. But Lord Mizukage, launching such a full-scale assault against the cloud will only result in an all-out war. He spoke. Fiona sighed, looking into the Toad Sage's eyes. Look around you, Master Jiraiya. We are already at war. He countered, getting a slow nod from Fugaku. It is settled then. Once I am appointed as the 5th Hokage, we shall set the plans in motion. Until then, this information does not leave this room. Fugaku said, looking at the others as he said it. Itachi didn't like the idea, but he knew that there was no other way now, knowing that even if the alliance between the Leaf and the Mist was ended, the other nations would not stop and only press forwards until they were destroyed. Very well. I will return to my village and start the slow preparations for war. Fiona said, slowly standing to his feet. Fugaku and the others also did the same, showing their respect to him as he stood. Very well. Fugaku then said, giving Fiona a nod before he watched him leave the room. Jiraiya also bid farewell to Fugaku and Itachi before he left the room, seeming to follow after Fiona, leaving the two Uchiha alone. What are you planning, father? Itachi asked, having a sense that something was off. For now, nothing. But I want you to be ready, son. He said, turning to face Itachi. Soon, everything will change. Fugaku then said, placing his hand on Itachi's shoulder as he looked into his eyes. Lord Mizukage, wait up, Jiraiya said, catching Fiona's attention as he walked back out into the sunlight. Fiona turned around, surprised to see that he had followed him, knowing that there must be more that he wished to discuss. Can I help you? Fiona asked, giving him a small smile. Let's talk, but someplace else. Jiraiya suddenly said, hinting at the unwanted attention that they were getting from the Umbu. Very well. Fiona agreed before he started to walk with him into the village. What is it that you wish to speak about? Fiona asked, sensing that they were no longer being watched. You may be the Kage of another village, but the old geezer trusted you. Jiraiya suddenly said. And your point is? Fiona asked, not knowing where he was going with this. I want you to be careful. Jiraiya suddenly said, giving Fiona a stern look. I'm not sure what it is yet, but something feels off about Fugaku's plan. Jiraiya suddenly said. You are worried about Fugaku? Fiona asked, surprised. But you just vouched for him to become the next Hokage, did you not? Yes. But not for the reasons you might think. Jiraiya suddenly said before he crossed his arms. What do you mean? Fiona asked, seeing that there was something weighing heavily upon his mind. For now, it is only a hunch, but I believe that there is more to this war than simply our alliance, Jiraiya said, looking Fiona in the eye. Anyway, for now just be careful. He suddenly said, seeming to relax a little before turning his back to the Mizukage. Fiona was surprised, however, he too felt as if something was afoot, even if he wasn't able to put his finger on it just yet. Very well, you too, Jiraiya. He then said, bidding the Toad Sage farewell as he watched him walk off into the village. Looks like my time in the Leaf has come to an end for now, Fiona said as he took one last look around. Time to go home. He then said, creating an ice mirror and slipping into it. Fiona stepped out of the other ice mirror into his office back in the village hidden in the mist, seeing Ao and Mei running through paperwork and strategic placement for troops along their borders. Fiona. Mei suddenly shouted as she saw him, jumping into his arms. Hey, I wasn't gone that long. Fiona said as he caught her, returning her long hug and kiss before putting her down. Ugh. Ao said as he cleared his throat, waiting for them to finish. Glad to see you're back safe. He then said, having had a bad feeling about the meeting. So how was it, did they come to a decision? Mei asked, not wasting any time. Yes. Fugaku Uchiha will become the 5th Hokage. Fiona said. But. Ao said, picking up on the expression on his face. Fiona sighed as he leaned back onto the desk, taking a seat and crossing his arms over his chest. You don't miss anything with that eye of yours, do you, Ao? Fiona said jokingly, causing Ao to laugh a little. Fiona took a deep breath before getting serious again, looking at both of them. I and Fugaku agreed that perhaps we have been too soft on the war front. And so, we have come to an agreement to punish the Cloud and Reikage for what he has done, putting on a show of force and marching to war with the Land of Lightning. Mei looked at her husband in surprise. You really want to launch a full-scale attack? She asked. Ao also seemed surprised but seemed to agree. I have to say, Fiona. I agree. No. Think about this for a moment. Mei said, not liking the idea. What is there to think about, Mei? We let the stone and sand get away with this in the first place. If Fuyona had put a stop to this right away and not been so soft, we could have avoided this war altogether. Ao suddenly said, causing Mei to get angry. What are you trying to say, Ao? Are you implying that Fuyona is soft? She suddenly yelled, getting angry. Not at all. I am simply saying that we should have taken action far sooner. He said, trying to defend himself. Fuyona sighed, knowing this would happen. All right, you two, that's enough. He said, getting them to go quiet as his voice was cold and deep. No, I will be launching a full-scale attack against the village hidden in the clouds, and a personal attack against the Reikage for the death of the third Hokage. Fuyona suddenly said, becoming deadly serious. This time, I will show the other nations why they should fear me. Alright, that's the end of this chapter. Again, thank you so much to all of you who support this story. I know times are hard and charisma is on the way, so I completely understand if you cannot afford to remain subscribed. With that said, I hope you are enjoying the story, and I will be trying to increase the number of chapters. Have a great day. Chapter 133, Chapter 133. Fuyona hadn't been able to get much sleep that night, feeling his mind run wild with possible outcomes and decisions that he would have to make. He knew how badly he had already upset the original timeline and that he wouldn't be able to count on certain events happening now, knowing that from here on out, everything that was yet to happen was foreign territory that he could only react to. However, that also gave him more room to act, knowing that if the timeline was already so distorted, then anything that he did wouldn't have as large an effect as he had first thought. Almost everything he had done had been planned out, acting accordingly from his knowledge of the Naruto verse. But now that had changed, everything was fair game in his vision for the future. Daddy! Wake up, Daddy! Both Shoto and Asami shouted as they ran into the room, jumping on the bed and waking him up. Arg! What is this? I'm under attack. He yelled, playing along with his children as he wrestled with them, causing them to giggle with excitement. Good morning, honey, Suiren said as she walked into the room, placing a mug of coffee down on the table for him. Thanks, Fuyona said, sitting up as both of the children sat to either side of him. Did I sleep in? He asked, not knowing what time it was. Only a little, but me and Mei thought it best to let you sleep. She said with a smile. Fuyona also smiled, taking a sip of his coffee. Thank you. He said, also smiling before he placed the coffee back down. All right, you two, how about we get some breakfast? He said to the kids, watching both of their faces light up. But Daddy, we already had breakfast, Asami said, causing Fuyona to laugh. Well, how about a second breakfast? He then said, picking her up and tickling her belly, causing her to laugh and squirm around trying to get free of his grasp. All right kids, let your father get up, Suiren said after a moment, watching as Fuyona put Asami down. Okay, Mummy. They both said, hopping off the bed and following her out of the room, leaving Fuyona alone for a moment to get up. Fuyona watched them walk out of the room, smiling as he did. No matter what, I will make this world a safer place for them. He thought, knowing he would do anything he could to keep them safe. With that, Fuyona got up and dressed before heading downstairs into the kitchen, still holding his coffee mug in his hand. Good morning, father, Haku said, greeting him from the kitchen table. Fuyona could see both Haku and Kimimaro sitting also drinking some tea, while Mei was cooking and Asami played with the children. Good morning, everyone. He said, greeting them all as he walked over to Suiren and gave her a kiss on the cheek before doing the same to Mei. Good morning, sleepyhead, Mei said, returning his kiss causing Fuyona to laugh a little. Here, grab a seat, dear, food will be ready for you in a moment. Mei then said, turning her attention back to the cooking. Fuyona nodded and sat down, joining Kimimaro and Haku. Good morning, boys, how are we both? He asked, knowing that they had begun their training with the others. Good, thank you, father, Kimimaro said, taking a sip of his tea. And how is your training going? He then asked. Both Kimimaro and Haku looked at each other before looking back to Fuyona, seeming a little nervous as they remembered the events from the previous day. The previous day. Haku, Kimimaro, Koyuki, and the others had all reported to one of the training grounds as they had been instructed to do so in order to continue their training while Fuyona was away on business. I wonder who will be training with us? Haku said as the three of them waited. It doesn't matter who it is, my goal is to get stronger no matter what, Hattori said, causing the others to remain quiet as they thought about their own goals. If your goal is to become stronger, then you must be willing to work for it. A voice suddenly said, giving off a killing aura before Hattori quickly drew his sword, only just stopping an attack from none other than Ganryu. Not bad, but how will you handle this? Ganryu said, allowing his shibuki to ignite some of its paper bombs, causing Hattori's eyes to open wide in shock before the sword exploded. Haku and the others also jumped back out of the way as the sword exploded, causing Ganryu to flip back into the air from the force of the attack before landing on the ground. Hattori! Yuri yelled, getting ready to attack Ganryu if she needed to. Not bad, kid, he said as he placed his blade onto his shoulder, watching as the dust settled. Hattori had activated his steel release, being able to tank the explosion from the attack from the Shibuki, only taking a small amount of damage. That jutsu is certainly strong. Another voice said, revealing Kaga and Mei who had been watching from the sidelines. Kaga-sensei, and Lady Mei. Koyuki said, surprised that they had arrived without being able to detect them. What the hell, that could have killed me. Hattori suddenly shouted, not impressed by the sudden surprise attack. Yeah, I was hoping it would have too. But you surprised me, kid. Ganryu said, not seeming bothered in the slightest. Now, everyone just settle down, Mei said, trying to calm the situation. We are here because Fiona asked us here to help with your training. She then said, getting a surprised reaction from them. You will be training us, Lady Mei? Koyuki asked, seeming to like the idea. Some of you yes, Mei said, flashing her a smile. As agreed, I'll take Koyuki and Yuri. Kaga said, looking at the others. Mei nodded, crossing her arms over her chest. Make sure to do your best, girls. She said, watching as they both slowly walked over towards Kaga. You're with me. Ganryu suddenly said, pointing his blast sword at Hattori. Fine with me, Hattori said, not complaining about the matchup. And that leaves the two of you with me. Mei then said, looking at both Haku and Kimimaro, getting a slow nod from both of them. Each of you will undergo training specific to what we believe your strengths are, as well as to improve upon what you are lacking in. Mei then said, getting everyone's attention before they all followed their new teachers to where they would start their training. Once everyone had left, both Haku and Kimimaro were left standing with Mei in the middle of the training ground. Very well then, boys, why don't you start by showing me what you've got, Mei said, keeping her arms crossed over her chest. Oh, and make sure to give it everything you have, otherwise, you might die. She then added. Both of the boys quickly took a fighting stance as they knew Mei was being serious, already knowing how strong she was. Here I come. Water style, water dragon bullet. Mei suddenly said, quickly creating the hand signs before she shot 2 dragon bullets out from her mouth. Look out. Haku said, quickly dashing in front of Kimimaro, quickly forming his own hand signs and creating an ice wall in front of them. Both of the water dragon bullets smashed into the ice wall, freezing on impact and bursting into ice. Now Kimimaro. Haku shouted, quickly creating more hand signs as the ice in front of him burst into thousands of tiny ice needles. I got it. Kimimaro shouted as he quickly charged forwards, allowing bones to cover his body as he prepared to attack. Not bad, but will you be able to get past this? Mei said, creating more hand signs and slapping her hand down onto the ground, creating a large earth pillar trap around Kimimaro, stopping him in his tracks. What is this? He asked, trying to escape the jutsu, but to no avail. Ha! Haku yelled, commanding the ice needles to fly forwards, targeting the earth pillars, doing enough damage to them to free Kimimaro, who burst out towards Mei, spinning through the air and shooting out bones from all over his body. Mei was surprised at their teamwork, feeling impressed as she quickly flipped back to get clear of the bones. However, Kimimaro was on her faster than she had predicted and slammed his heel down onto her head, smashing her into the ground. Look out! Haku yelled, seeing that it was a water clone. Substitution! Kimimaro shouted, feeling a sudden jolt come from behind him. Water style, water wall. Mei yelled, unleashing a large blast of water that crashed into Kimimaro, knocking him back and dragging him to the ground. Now, lightning style, Mei said, clapping her hands together as she was about to combine both of the chakra natures together. Ice style, ice pillar jutsu, Haku said, creating a large ice pillar that suddenly burst up from Mei's feet, almost trapping her in it as she jumped out of the way. Mei was quick to jump back, watching as another ice pillar shot out from the water trying to trap her inside, this time catching her foot. Got you, Haku said, raising his hand as he allowed the ice to suddenly spread up her leg and around her body, trapping her. Wow. He actually got me. Mei thought, looking at the ice that encased her body. We did it. Both Haku and Kimimaro shouted, seeming pleased that they had managed to trap her. I guess I should try from here on out. Mei then thought, smiling before she opened her eyes. Oh, boys. She said, getting their attention. This fight isn't over yet. She then said, blowing some acid mist onto the ice around her body, melting it with ease. No way. Haku said, not understanding how she was able to melt his ice. What is that jutsu? Kimimaro asked, also not knowing what it was. Vapor style. And now, lava style. Mei said, forming the hand signs as she suddenly expelled a large wave of lava from her mouth, creating a large sheet that threatened to cover both of them. "Look out!" Haku yelled, quickly putting up a large dome of ice to try and block the jutsu. The ice and lava mixed and connected, trying to repel one another as it formed a kind of molten crystal material. However, Mei wasn't finished with only that attack, quickly appearing behind both of them from under the ground using her earth style. "In a real battle, one must use everything they have to win," Mei said, clapping her hands together as she raised a large earth-style dome around them, trapping all of them inside together. "What is she doing?" Haku thought as he placed his own hands together, preparing a jutsu. "It's over." "Vapor style," Mei said, simply blowing out the acid air from her mouth. "And that's pretty much how that day ended," Haku said, finishing telling his father the story. Fuyona couldn't help but laugh as he looked at the expression on both of their faces. "Oh boy, it sounds as if you have both had a pretty rough time. After all, I know just how scary Mei can be," he then said, winking at the two of them. "I heard that," Mei suddenly said, appearing behind him holding the frying pan in her hand, causing all three of them to panic. "Quick run for it." Alright, that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day and see you soon. Chapter 134, Start of the Invasion of the Waterfall Arc. More time seemed to pass as the threat of war grew larger with skirmishes between the nations breaking out across the world. All of the nations, large and small, had seemed to become dragged into what had started as a petty squabble, as if a pebble that had created a small ripple had resulted in a tidal wave. Fuyona had his hands full as he tried to deal with the outbreak of battles that his troops had become engaged in. Even simple missions had turned into life and death, not that everyone was out for their own gain. Another pressing concern was that the sand had also rejoined the war, taking the side of the stone and cloud, also seeming to draw in other smaller nations such as the rain, grass, rivers, rock, hot water and frost joining the cloud and stone, leaving only the mist, leaf, waterfall, and snow against the rest of the world. Battles had been breaking out all across the land, and Fuyona along with Fugaku, the fifth Hokage, were trying their best to contain the smaller skirmishes across their land, knowing that a full-scale battle could arrive any day. Fuyona sat in his office, trying to decipher reports flooding in from scouts and squads from all over the place at the constant warfare taking place. It had now been one whole month since his meeting with Fugaku and Jiraiya at the meeting for the new Hokage. Fugaku had been chosen and his coronation had taken place a few days later, which of course, Fuyona attended with both Mei and Suiren. "Sir, I have more reports coming in that an assault force from the hidden grass and stone are trying to lay siege to the hidden waterfall," Kogetsu, Fiona's personal head of his Umbu guard and next head of the Hozuki clan, said, appearing before him dressed in his Umbu robes. "What? Is the Hokage aware of this?" Fuyona asked. "I am not sure, sir," Kogetsu spoke. "Ao, dispatch a message to the leaf at once," Fuyona said as he looked over to him. "Yes," Ao said, not wasting any time before he exited the office. "The waterfall placed their trust in both me and the Hokage by joining us in this war. The least we can do is try to support them from our enemies," Mei said, knowing that they were surrounded by the rest of the nations, making them an easy target. Fuyona read the rest of the report, seeing that a strike force of at least 300 shinobi had been sent to try and take out the waterfall, knowing that if they attacked from all sides, they would spread their forces thin and wipe them out. "The shinobi from the waterfall are no pushovers, but they will still need help," Mei said, having battled against them before in the last war, knowing firsthand that their small nation had produced some powerful shinobi. "Sir, I have a message from the Hokage," Ao said, having used one of Fiona's ice mirrors to directly hand the message over to Shikaka Nara, the lead advisor to the Hokage. "Go ahead, Ao. The Hokage has been made aware of the situation and is preparing to send a unit of skilled shinobi to deal with the assault. He is, however, asking that we too send a unit to assist with the battle," Ao said. "Very well. Kogetsu, I want you and Ganryu to lead a force of 50 chunin to help in the battle," Fuyona said, knowing that was all he could spare. "Of course, sir," Kogetsu said, lowering his head before he vanished, not wasting any time. "I know what you are thinking, dear," Mei said after a moment. "But you can't do everything yourself. You are needed in the village for the time being," she then said, placing her hand on his. Fuyona sighed, knowing that she was right, having Northwest choice but to place his faith in his men. "I know, Mei. I just wish it didn't have to come to this," he said, leaning back in his chair. Kogetsu had wasted no time in finding Ganryu, who was currently busy training Hattori on one of the training fields on the outskirts of the village. "Not bad, brat. But can you handle this?" Ganryu shouted as he swung his blast sword down at Hattori. Hattori was using his steel release and swift release in combination as he avoided the attack and attacked with his hardened arms like blades. Ganryu in his experience was able to predict the direction of attack, even though Hattori's swift release was indeed quick and caused him to disappear from his eyesight. Ganryu blocked one of Hattori's attacks with his sword, triggering the explosion tags, acting as a simultaneous defense and attack, one that blasted Hattori back, even with his steel release protecting him. "Come on, is that all you have?" Ganryu said as he placed the head of his sword on the ground. Hattori was breathing hard now, having used much of his chakra to simply maintain the steel release around his body to protect him from the explosions. "I'm not done yet," he said, biting his lip as he placed his hands together. "Oh, another ninjutsu, eh?" Ganryu questioned, keeping the same expression on his face as he always had. "I'm afraid I must ask you both to hold your battle for now," Kogetsu suddenly said as he appeared in the middle of them both, causing Hattori to stop his hand signs halfway through. "Ah." And just when things were getting good, Ganryu spoke before he spat on the floor and put his sword away. "Well, what is it?" he then said, knowing it would be something important if Fiona's head Umbu guard had come to speak with him. "We have a mission from Lord Mizukage," Kogetsu said before he took his mask off. "Is that right?" Ganryu said, smiling for the first time all day. "And here I was thinking I would be stuck on babysitting duty for the whole war." Kogetsu turned around to look at Hattori, seeing that he had become stronger from his training so far, not being able to help but wonder how strong the others in his class had also become. "So go on, what's the mission?" Ganryu then asked after a moment, growing impatient. "Yes. Our allies of the waterfall are under attack from the stone and grass. We and the Leaf are sending a combined force to help assist them in the fight, and Lord Mizukage has requested that you lead a squad of 50 Chunin, including myself, to help in the battle," Kogetsu explained. "The hidden waterfall, eh?" Ganryu said as he pulled out a cigarette and lit it, taking a large puff before he blew out the smoke. "Sounds fun," he then said, looking over to Hattori. "Pack your things, kid, this will be the perfect opportunity to test out your training," he spoke. Hattori didn't show any hesitation and simply nodded. "Wait, Ganryu. I don't think that Lord Mizukage will approve of you taking him on this mission," Kogetsu said, not liking it. "Oh, don't worry about that, all of these brats are coming, they are Chunin after all, aren't they?" he said, blowing out more smoke towards Kogetsu. "Besides, what the hell is the point of all this training if they don't get to experience real combat?" he then said. Kogetsu knew there was no arguing with him, and he also knew that he outranked him, leaving him with no other choice other than to obey his orders. "Very well, I will make the preparations. We will be leaving for the Leaf tomorrow," Kogetsu said before he vanished, leaving Hattori and Ganryu alone again. "Well, kid, you ready to get stuck into this war?" Ganryu asked, turning back to Hattori as he took the cigarette from his mouth and held it in his fingers, blowing another large puff of smoke into the air. "Yeah," Hattori said with no emotion, leaving Ganryu impressed. "Well, I guess we had better finish your training," he then said, dropping the cigarette onto the ground before he crushed it with his foot. "Now, show me what you have learnt," Ganryu said as he drew his blast sword before pointing it at Hattori. "Yes, sir," Hattori yelled as he allowed his steel release to cover his entire body, taking a fight stance. Arg. Chapter 135, Chapter 135. "He wants to what?" Fiona asked, looking at Kogetsu after listening to his report. "Is that a bad thing?" Ao then asked, keeping his arms crossed as he spoke. "Honestly, they are already strong enough and would be a huge help with our forces already stretched so far," Kogetsu then said, speaking his thoughts. Mei and Ao seemed to agree before they all looked to Fiona to see what he had to say. "I guess I have no choice. They are all Chunin now, and who am I to deny them a critical mission and pass it off to someone else?" Fiona reluctantly said, knowing he couldn't say no to Ganryu's request to take them, but also knowing the danger that could threaten Kimimaro with the Akatsuki looming. "Very well, it's settled. Now on to the next matter," he then said, knowing he couldn't hold him in the village forever. "Our reports say that there are at least 200 enemy shinobi from the stone and grass trying to lay siege against the waterfall," Ao said. "Yes, our scouts report that the main bulk of the force is located from the west side, along their border with the hidden grass," Mei said, looking at the map that was laid out on the war table, as she placed pointers into the locations. "Well, I say good luck to them. We all know that the hidden waterfall has never been invaded." Mangetsu scoffed with a smirk, crossing his arms as he said it. "That may be so, but with that many shinobi blocking their borders, it will be no easy feat for them to move trade, units or their own citizens in and out of their nation," Fiona said, interlocking his fingers as he spoke. "We can only spare about 50 men at a push, and the Hokage said he could do the same, meaning with the forces that the waterfall already have we should be able to push them back with relative ease," Mei then said. "Doesn't this all seem a little strange?" Ao said after a moment, not having a good feeling about the whole thing. "What do you mean, Ao?" Fiona asked. "Why would the waterfall request help from us and the Leaf to only deal with a small force such as 200? He spoke. "Surely Shibuki can manage the situation alone," Ao said, seeming to make sense to the others in the room. "I understand your concern, Ao. but do not threat. Fuyona then said. Shibuki is no pushover, but the enemy is simply not giving them a fair fight. Instead, they are planning to cut off the waterfall from the rest of the world, and slowly infiltrate using small units to cause maximum damage. Fuyona explained. Once the waterfall commits to one area with a large force, smaller units that are spread out will circle and infiltrate the mainland. It's a very well thought out strategy. Mei also said, agreeing with Fuyona. So, what? We send help and push back the enemy forces, only to have them continue to assault them in the same way when we leave? Mangetsu asked, also making sense. I guess we will find out once we send our troops. Fuyona then said, knowing that Ao was right. I see. Very well then, Ao said, seeming to drop the issue, realizing that Fuyona was already aware of the situation. Kogetsu, have Ganryu make the preparations, Fuyona said after a moment, getting a nod before the Umbu captain vanished. All we can do is wait and see what Ganryu and Kogetsu report back to us. Until then, we will do our best to help our ally, Fuyona said, leaning his chin on his hands as he rested his elbows on his desk. Haku and Kimimaro had finished their training for the day, having been training for a whole month now with Mei, and having improved a whole lot already. Both of the boys had been giving it their all in a sparring match against one another, with the result being a tie since they were using only taijutsu. Now they were both enjoying some water and wiping the sweat away before Haku noticed Koyuki appear from the tree line. Oh, hey look, it's Koyuki, Haku said, getting Kimimaro to look up from where he was lying on the ground. Hey, you two, Koyuki said as she approached them, seeing that they had been working hard. Is everything all right? Haku asked, not sure why she was stopping by when he knew she had her own training. Well, you could say that. But I'm here because Lord Mizukichi asked me to tell you something. She said, taking a slight pause. Father did. Kimimaro said, waiting for her to continue. We have a mission. She said, with a serious expression on her face, getting both of their attention. Yeah. We are being assigned to a large unit that is being taken to help the hidden waterfall in the war. She said. Haku and Kimimaro realized the seriousness of the mission, knowing that they would be heading to the front lines of the war effort. If that is what Father requires of me, then I will do my best to be of use, Haku said with a simple smile on his face. This is what we have been training for after all. Kimimaro then said, not seeming bothered. We are shinobi. This day was always going to come. Koyuki nodded, suddenly expressing a large smile on her face. I'm glad you both feel the same way about this, because for me personally, I can't wait to put my new training to the test. Koyuki suddenly said as she punched her hand, getting excited. Both Haku and Kimimaro stood up and also smiled as they nodded their heads in agreement. So, when do we leave? Haku then asked, putting his hands behind his head. Tomorrow, Koyuki replied as she crossed her hands behind her waist and turned around. So, make sure you have everything you need because, from the sounds of it, we could be there for a while. She then said before she walked off, leaving both of the boys alone. If I'm not mistaken, the waterfall is located between the grass and the stone, meaning it's pretty much surrounded on all sides, Haku said. All that matters is that we do our best so that we can make Father proud, Kimimaro said, seeming to get fired up about it. Haku simply nodded in agreement before he picked up his towel off the ground. All right, let's call it a day. Besides, it's probably best if we rest up and prepare for tomorrow. Kimimaro nodded and grabbed his own belongings before the two of them started heading back towards their home. Meanwhile, back in Fiona's office. Kaga, Mei, and Ganryu were standing in the office with Fuyona. Each of them was there so he could ask how their training was going. I can report that both of them have progressed further than I had expected, but then again I expected nothing less from them, Mei said, seeming very confident in their abilities. Fuyona nodded, seeming happy with her report. And what about Koyuki and Yuri? He then asked, looking at Kaga. They also improved at a good rate, Koyuki especially, she certainly lives up to her father's name. He said, seeming happy with their progress. And what about Hattori? Fuyona then asked, looking at Ganryu. Well, he managed not to die, Ganryu said, not seeming bothered at all. I guess that is an achievement in its own right since you were overseeing his training, Fuyona said, chuckling a little to himself. Anyway, back to business. Fuyona then said, becoming serious again. The 50 Chunin have been selected for this mission, being led by Ganryu and Kogetsu. I wish we had more manpower to spear, but Chunin is all we have for the time being. Fuyona said, knowing that he did not want to use Genin if he could help it. Ganryu nodded, not really showing any sign of emotion, knowing that he would take whoever he was given. The aim of your mission is to provide relief to the waterfall's forces, helping to deal with the ambushes and small squads that continue to raid their land and borders, Fuyona said, explaining his goal. I also don't expect this mission to be over anytime soon, and you could be stationed there for some time. He also added. Of course, Lord Mizukichi, your will be done, Ganryu said, lowering his head in respect. Very well then, you move out tomorrow. Ao then said. You will also be meeting with the Leaf's forces tomorrow, heading to the waterfall together as a full unit, Fuyona said, letting Ganryu know all of the details. Understood. He simply replied. Very well, good luck with your mission. Fuyona, Mei, and Ao all said, wishing him all the luck they could muster together. With that, Ganryu left the office, leaving Mei, Ao, and Fuyona alone to continue talking about their strategy for the ongoing war. The details of the mission had been sent out to everyone who would be going, including Kimimaro and the others, who were now resting up at home and making preparations for their new mission. Suiren had already started making dinner and both of the children were playing in the living room with one another. Since you are both going out on an important in the morning, I am cooking you both a large meal, with plenty left over for you to take with you tomorrow. After all, you are both growing boys and need your food. She said to the pair with a large smile. Haku and Kimimaro both nodded, happy to hear that they would be able to feast tonight when suddenly the sound of the front door opening caught everyone's attention. Mummy, Daddy. Both Shoto and Asami yelled as they ran over to greet their parents, diving into Fiona's arms. Hello, children. He yelled back, scooping both of them in his arms and giving them a large squeeze, causing they both to yell playfully. Fiona put them both down and they both ran over to Mei, giggling as they jumped on her too, leaving Fiona to turn his attention towards Haku and Kimimaro. I see you are prepared for tomorrow? Fiona asked. Yes, father, Haku said without hesitation. Good. He said, turning his attention to Suiren who walked over to him and gave him a kiss. Nice of you to use the front door for a change. She said jokingly. Well, I fancied a walk through the village this time. He said as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, you got here just in time for dinner. She said before heading back over to the oven to check on the final details. Father. Can I ask, what is the hidden waterfall like? Kimimaro asked suddenly. What is it like He said as pulled a chair out and sat down, taking a moment to think about it. I'm honestly not sure. He then said with a goofy smile. Mei sighed with a smile at his goofiness while sitting down next to him, having already for both of the children sat down in their seats. I can tell you what the hidden waterfall is like, boys. She then said, getting both of their attention as well as Fiona's. I didn't know you had been to the hidden waterfall, Mei. Suiren also said, turning around from what she was doing. Yes, actually it was around the time that you disappeared from the village, Fiona. She said, teasing him a little. Fiona laughed a little as he remembered back to that time. Anyway, I believe I was tasked on a mission to assassinate a target from the hidden grass. It wasn't until I got there that I learned he was hiding out in the remote land of the Waterfall Nation. Long story short, the Waterfall Ninja were not too happy to find me in their land, and of course, we ended up fighting. Mei explained, with a small wave of her hand. What are their shinobi like? Haku asked, remembering the squad that had competed in the Chunin exams in the Leaf Village. The Waterfall is a small nation, but they produce very strong shinobi, and always have, Mei said, seeming to give them credit where credit was due. Still, it is good to have them as an ally this time around. She then said before Suiren placed the dinner plate down. All right, let's eat. Suiren then said, getting a cheer from everyone as they tucked into their food, giving both of the boys a good send-off before their mission tomorrow. End of chapter. Chapter 136, Chapter 136. The next morning came quickly, and the time had come for Haku and Kimimaro to deploy with the unit towards the hidden leaf, where they would meet another unit and then head out towards the hidden waterfall village together. Good luck on your mission, boys, be safe, Suiren said, watching as they both prepared to leave the house. We will be, Haku said before he looked at Fiona. Do your best. Fiona simply said as he pulled them both in for a hug, knowing the danger that they could face. Don't put yourselves in any unnecessary danger, Fiona added as he let them go, keeping a hand on each of their shoulders. We won't, Kimimaro said, nodding to him with a confident smile. My both of you have grown so much. Mei then said, also giving both of them a hug. Remember to watch each other's backs. She also added. Big brother, don't go. Little Shoto suddenly said, pulling on Haku's leg as he hugged it. I'm sorry, but I have to, Haku said, patting his head as he knelt down, so they were the same height. But don't worry, I will be back before you know it. Haku then said, flashing him a soft smile. You promise? Shoto asked. I do, Haku said, reassuring the child. Asami on the other hand wasn't as bothered and liked to act more grown-up about these things, seeming more like Kimimaro in her personality. Time to get moving, boys. Fiona then said, reminding them that Ganryu didn't like to be kept waiting. Yes, sir. They both said as they took their bags and headed out of the door, leaving their family and home as everyone waved their goodbyes. Both of them started walking through the village as they made their way towards the rendezvous point. Hey! A familiar voice said from the distance, revealing Koyuki, who was walking the same way as them. "Good morning, you two," she said, seeming excited. "Morning," Kimimaro said as he carried on walking, leaving Haku to greet her as normal. "So today is the day. Our first mission in the war." Koyuki then said, stopping for a moment. "What's wrong?" Haku asked. "This is real, we are really going to be fighting in the war." She spoke. "That's right, and this is our chance to prove ourselves." Kimimaro then said, getting a serious look from the others. "That's right," they both said, agreeing with him before they all started walking again. "This is what we've been training for. No matter what we face, we will face it together," they all said as they headed through the village towards the meeting point. Soon enough they arrived at the location, meeting up with the large squad who were waiting for the remainder of the troops to arrive. Haku took a good look around as he tried to scoop out everyone there and determine their strength, something he always did no matter where he was. "Looks like you guys made the cut after all," Hattori suddenly said, appearing behind the group and getting their attention. "Of course, we did, we have been training just as hard as you," Koyuki said, also looking at Yuri who was standing next to him. "Isn't that right, Yuri?" Yuri simply nodded as her face was half hidden behind her scarf as usual before she pulled it a little further up, being as antisocial as always. "Is it just us or have any of the others made the cut?" Koyuki then asked, taking a look around to see if she could see them. "Hey!" Another voice also shouted, making their way through the crowd of shinobi. Well, if it isn't Kujira," Kimimaro said, giving him a nod of acceptance as the two of them locked eyes. "Kimimaro," he said back, also nodding his head. "I see your wounds have healed." Haku also said with a smile, knowing that he had been hurt badly in the battle against Juzo and Zabuza. "Aman, I can't believe you guys also got an invite," another voice then said, revealing Chika, Hozuki and Rokuro. "Don't be like that, Chika, if not for them we would all be dead," Rokuro said, nodding to Haku, who returned his greeting with a smile. "Whoopee, looks like the gang is back together," Hattori suddenly said, sounding very sarcastic. "Just remember that this isn't a picnic we are going on, this is war. So, stop playing so nicey nice, and start acting like shinobi," Hattori suddenly said. "Some things never change," Rokuro then said, causing the others to all laugh and ignore him. "Alright you lot, listen up," a tough voice then said, getting all of their attention as they turned to see Ganryu standing at the center of the unit. "Now that everyone is here, I want you all to make one final check on your equipment, making sure you are ready for the road ahead," he said, giving them a moment to do so. "Now, if no one has any complaints, we will make our move," he then said as he tossed a scroll onto the ground, allowing it to roll open. "What's that?" Chika asked, not being able to contain her curiosity. Ganryu made a few hand signs and suddenly an ice mirror formed from the scroll, freezing the very air around it and creating one large ice mirror. "This is a transport ice mirror, courteous of Lord Mizukichi himself," Ganryu replied, hearing Chika's question. "Thanks to this, we can head to the Leaf Village in a matter of seconds, rather than having to cross the ocean like usual," he then said. "Now, follow me, you runts," Ganryu finally said before he stepped through the ice mirror, disappearing from everyone's view. Everyone did as they were told, having seen Fiona's jutsu at least once, and knowing what it could do. "Man, this sure beats getting on a boat," someone said. "Can't complain about a transportation jutsu like this one, man, what would we do without Lord Fifth?" Another also said, praising Fiona. "Let's move," Hattori said, taking the lead as he pressed forwards towards the ice mirror. The others all agreed and followed, each of them walking through the ice mirror one at a time before they came through the other side. Haku and the others could see that they had arrived just outside of the hidden Leaf Village, spotting the large wall that surrounded it. "This never gets old," Kimimaro said, knowing how useful and time-saving his jutsu was. "Hey, can't you use this jutsu, Haku?" Chika suddenly asked, standing behind him. "Kind of, but it's not as simple as that. Father. I mean Lord Mizukichi can use it much better than I can," he explained. "Don't be so humble, Haku. We both know you can use the jutsu just as well," Kimimaro then said, not seeing why he would put himself down like that. "Well, you know," he simply said, rubbing the back of his head with a smile. Hattori listened to the conversation with his arms crossed, pretending to pay no attention but knowing that Haku was certainly downplaying his abilities, especially since he had experienced them firsthand. "Alright everyone, wait here while I go and speak to the Leafs units," Ganryu said, ordering everyone to stay put. "Kogetsu, you are in charge while I am gone," he then said, getting a nod from the Umbu commander. With that, Ganryu headed towards the Leaf Village gates that had 4 Chunin-level shinobi on as security. "Hold," one of them said, seeing that he was a mist shinobi. "I am Ganryu of the Mist, here are my papers," He then said, announcing himself and showing the special ID that the Leaf and Mist had come up with to allow passage into one another's village. The Chunin ninja took the ID and applied his chakra to it, confirming that it was real after a moment. Yes, welcome to the Leaf. He then said, already expecting him. Wait here and we will send word that you have arrived. The Chunin guard then said, getting a nod from Ganryu before he leaned back against one of the large open gates. Mind if I have a smoke? Ganryu also asked, getting a confused look from the young shinobi before he nodded. Why yeah, sure. Going to end this one here. Hope you enjoyed it. Chapter 137, Chapter 137. Ganryu found himself still waiting at the gates of the village hidden in the leaves, having finished not one but two smokes now, not being able to help but wonder what was taking so long. Sorry to keep you waiting. A voice suddenly said, as its owner appeared from behind the gate. Kakashi. Ganryu said, recognizing who he was. You arrived here faster than we expected. So, it took us a little time to gather our forces. The silver-haired man said. Whatever, just let me know when you are ready to move, Ganryu said, kicking himself up from the gate he had been leaning on with his foot. I can see that you have been waiting a while, Kakashi said, seeing that Ganryu had a short fuse already. Like I said, whatever. He said again, this time walking away as he was speaking. He sure is impatient, Kakashi said as he rubbed the back of his head, watching as he walked away. Time to move out then. He then said, not having to look behind him to know that his unit was ready. Haku and the others had been waiting for a while for Ganryu to come back, wondering what was taking so long. Alright you sorry lot, get ready to move. Ganryu's voice suddenly boomed, catching everyone's attention. Everyone did as they were told, grabbing their belongings and preparing to move as they watched the Hidden Leaf's forces follow behind their commander. Alright, we will be making our way towards the land of waterfalls from here out. But, I need everyone to be on high alert, as the possibility of an enemy attack is extremely high. Ganryu said. I think it best if we have our forces divided into units and travel in a staggered formation. That way we will be less presentable to a large-scale attack or ambush. Kakashi suddenly spoke up, giving his input as the leader of the Leaf's forces. I agree, Ganryu said, turning to face Kakashi as he pulled a cigarette out of his pocket. Kogetsu, I'll leave it to you. He then said, lighting his fag and taking a large breath of smoke. Of course sir. Kogetsu said, knowing that he simply could not be bothered to do it himself. Okay everyone, please form 6-man teams, once done we will be heading out keeping a distance of 50 meters apart from each squad as we move in a staggered formation, Kogetsu said, giving the order. Everyone nodded and started moving as they formed their own squads. Haku, Kimimaro, and Koyuki joined squads with Kujira and his squad as they prepared to move out. Kakashi and Kogetsu could see that everyone was ready and soon gave the order to start moving, with Kakashi leading the first squad and Kogetsu not far behind. Ganryu had chosen to remain closer to the back so he could keep an eye on the rearguard units, knowing that if they faced an attack from there, they would have the leadership to help keep them in formation. Let's move out. Kakashi said, giving the order now that everyone was ready. Make sure your guard is up, there could be enemies anywhere, Kimimaro said, getting a nod from the others who had also put their guard up. After all, the war had spread into all lands between the major nations, and units of enemy shinobi had been spread out across them, having orders to either gain intel or sabotage anything they could as a means of guerrilla warfare. It was also at least a full day's journey to the land of waterfalls with so many men, meaning they would have to be extra careful. How are you feeling now, Kujira? Have all of your wounds healed? Haku asked after a while, making small talk with his classmate. That Sabuza guy really did a number on me. But I'm fine now, and raring to go. Kujira said after a moment, flexing his bicep as the group jumped through the trees, making their way through the land of fire, following the other squads. Anyway, what about you guys? Rumor was that you were all doing some intense training while I was in the hospital. Kujira then asked, having heard the news from Chika. Yeah. You could say that. Haku said, not really saying anything else about it before he turned his attention back to his front. Rokuro and Chika regularly visited the hospital to visit their teammate, Kujira. And even though Haku and the others had been receiving special training on Fiona's orders, he had also made sure to have the others do training of their own with their own sensei, making sure that he kept the next generation of the village hidden in the mist on top form. So how far is it until we reach the land of waterfalls? Rokuro asked, being able to see the squad in front of them in the distance of the trees. It should only take a day at the rate we are moving, maybe even less, Haku said, having studied the maps of the land during his tracker ninja training. Pay attention to our surroundings rather than asking how long this will take. Kimimaro suddenly said. Don't forget, we are at war and the enemy could be anywhere. He then added, causing Rokuro to go quiet knowing he was right. The others all agreed and paid their attention back to the journey, knowing that this wasn't just another stroll through the woods. Hey! Can anyone else see the squad that should be in front of us? Rokuro suddenly asked, causing the others to stop, each landing on a different branch as they strained their eyes to try and see into the distance. Were we going too slow or something? Chika then asked. Kimimaro quickly stood up and pulled out a flare, and he shot it into the air. What the hell? Rokuro asked. We are under attack. Kimimaro then yelled, knowing that hopefully, his flare signal would alert the other squads to the danger. Look out. Haku suddenly shouted as he threw a Senbon needle, deflecting a kunai that was about to hit Rokuro in the back of the head. Attack! A sudden roar and battle cry could be heard coming from the darkness of the forest as enemy shinobi from the land of stone and cloud jumped out, each of them ready to attack. Shit, how did they manage to surround us so easily? Kimimaro yelled, counting 15 of them, already knowing that they were Chunin level at the minimum. A storm of kunai was launched towards the group from all angles, not giving them any time to react thanks to their ambush tactics. Ice style, ice dome. Haku said as he quickly formed a large ice dome around everyone apart from Chika, who was standing a little too far away for him to reach. The kunai simply bounced off of the ice dome, with its defenses proving to be too great for mere kunai. However, Chika was hit from all angles, getting shredded by the metal projectiles before she dropped out of the tree towards the ground. Chika! Kujira yelled, not understanding why she would be hurt by the kunai. It's alright, Kujira. She's fine. Haku said, already knowing her plan before he made a few more hand signs. Time to counterattack. He then said as he clasped his hands together, finishing his jutsu. Ice style, 1,000 needles of death. He said, allowing the ice dome to suddenly burst and scatter 1,000 tiny needles of ice towards the enemy shinobi, taking them off guard. Look out. One of them yelled as they did their best to either dodge or deflect the ice needles, with only those who had skill in combat being able to do so, while the others were ripped to shreds. Ice style. One of them yelled, knowing that the ice was the jutsu of the famous Mizukage. Now. Kimimaro yelled as he quickly disappeared from where he had been standing, alone with Haku and Koyuki. Each of them quickly pushed on the counterattack while the enemy was still trying to recover. Man, they are fast. Rokuro said, not even having been able to react to the ambush. Take this. Kimimaro yelled, having dashed over to 5 stone shinobi who had been able to deflect the ice needles. Don't let this brat get away. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. Kimimaro shouted, allowing his bones to suddenly protrude from his skin, catching the shinobi off guard. What the hell is this freak? One of them said before Kimimaro slit his throat with one of his bone blades, making light work of him. Why you? Another of them shouted, lifting his sword before swinging it down with all of his strength. However, Kimimaro was too fast and simply stepped to the side without altering his direction of movement, allowing him to dodge the attack as he made it look easy. Agar. The men yelled as Kimimaro plunged his bone blade down through his shoulder, feeling it pierce his heart, not stopping his advance as he left the bone blade in his body and carried on his assault towards the others. Time to finish the rest of you. Alright, that is it for this chapter, first one of the year. I know it has been a good while now since an update, and I do hope you all had a great new year. Hopefully starting to speed up the flow of chapters now, so be ready for more soon. As always, have a great day. Chapter 138, Chapter 138. Kakashi leads the front of the platoon, leading the way towards the land of waterfalls as the head of the Hidden Leaf's forces. So far he had not noticed anything out of the ordinary and had kept moving forwards at a steady rate. Sir! Another leaf shinobi suddenly yelled, catching his attention as he quickly stopped. Kakashi turned around and instantly saw the smoke from the flare that Kimimaro had released. An enemy attack, he said, quickly scanning the area. Mugata, can you see anything? Kakashi quickly asked, looking at a member of the Hyuga clan who was with him. Mugata quickly activated his eyes and started scanning back to see what was going on. I can see several small units of enemy shinobi that have attacked our platoon's middle and rear units. He yelled, causing Kakashi and the others to tense. Darn it. They must have known that by attacking the middle and center ranks the front would notice quickly enough to help them. What should we do, Kakashi? Another leaf shinobi asked. We have no choice, we have to press forwards and trust that the others can hold their own. After all, Ganryu is at the rear, and I'm sure he can handle it. Kakashi said, knowing it would only make things worse if they circled back to help now, knowing it was better for half of their forces to arrive at the hidden waterfall than none at all. But sir? Another asked. That's an order. Make sure to alert all the squads who are not under attack to keep moving forwards. Kakashi then said to a member of the Yamanaka clan, who quickly nodded as he sat cross-legged on the ground as he started to focus. Meanwhile, Ganryu, who had positioned himself at the rear of the platoon with his own squad, had also noticed the smoke from the flare, instantly knowing what it meant. We are under attack, make yourselves ready, men. He yelled before he drew his sword. Arg. The battle cries of the enemy shinobi could be heard as they realized that their ambush had failed, trying to make the most of it as they attacked all at once. Ganryu could see that these were a mix of cloud and grass shinobi, weighing up that their ranks were merely high chunin level at best. Kill the leader. Two of them yelled, quickly dashing towards Ganryu as they both drew their weapons. Humph. Fools. Ganryu simply said as he raised his sword, allowing a strip of blast bombs to move onto the blade, watching as the two of them quickly dashed in a zigzag line between each other trying to confuse him. Double water bullet jutsu. Kogetsu suddenly yelled, hitting both of the ninja dead center of their chest, dropping them to the ground with ease. Ganryu simply sighed as he lowered his sword. Are you alright, Ganryu? Kogetsu said as he landed on the ground, having used his aerial assault to take them both off guard. You idiot, of course, I'm alright, Ganryu said, simply pulling out a cigarette from his pocket as he placed his sword over his shoulder. The enemy forces have attacked the center and rear of our platoon, Kogetsu said, relaying the information. And what of the front? Ganryu asked as he lit his cigarette. Our recon team has reported that the front squads have carried on moving, under the orders of Kakashi, Kogetsu said. Ganryu took a large puff from his cigarette before he spoke. Good, we will handle this attack ourselves, let the leaf run along and leave this to us. Time to finish the rest of you. Kimimaro yelled as he charged toward three more stone shinobi, letting his bones reap out of his body, and giving him a menacing look. What the hell is this kid? One of them shouted as he held his sword tight, clutching it towards his body in fear. I don't know, but he's dangerous up close, so let's keep him at a distance. One of the others said, quickly taking action and not letting his emotion get the better of him. Earth style, earth bullet jutsu. The men shouted, finishing his hand signs before the earth around him and the others started to dislodge itself and float into the air. Kimimaro could see what was happening but carried on his assault regardless. Take this. The stone shinobi said as he unleashed his jutsu, letting the small chunks of rock and mud fly through the air with serious speed, creating enough force to rip apart the trees and other terrains it made contact with. Kimimaro quickly realized he wouldn't be able to charge through head first without cover, and quickly dashed from side to side as he did his best to avoid the earth bullets. I've got him cornered now. One of you, finish him off quickly. The stone ninja shouted over to his allies, already locked in place as he continued his rain of rocks and mud. Right. Just keep him still for long enough. The other said as he quickly formed the hand signs before slapping his hands together. Earth style, sandwich technique. He yelled. Kimimaro was busy dodging the projectiles and was struggling to press forward on the advance because of them, knowing he would have to do something about the user of the jutsu. Suddenly the ground around him started to shake as two large pillars of mud and rock burst from the earth, flying right toward him from both sides as they intended to crush him between them. I've got you now. The stone shinobi shouted, watching as his jutsu was about to crush Kimimaro, certain of his victory. Meanwhile, Haku and the others were busy dealing with the threats from the other enemy shinobi that had managed to survive against Haku's ice needles, leaving only 4 cloud shinobi left to face off against Haku, Koyuki, Kujira, and Rokuro. Looks like your ambush failed. Koyuki yelled as she wasted no time in pressing on her counterattack, targeting the largest cloud shinobi she could see. You damn brats. The men yelled as he blocked her attack with his own kunai, allowing the metal to clash against one another, flicking up sparks against each of their faces. Miyuki could feel he was stronger than her and was pushed back, flipping through the air before she landed in a cat-like pose. Darn brat. The men yelled, knowing he was stronger than her as he was about to press on the counterattack. Die. Koyuki suddenly said, slowly raising her hand to make a seal that ignited a paper bomb that she had placed onto his arm. When did she? He yelled, trying to pull it off in alarm. Boom. The paper bomb exploded, kicking up a large amount of dust while killing the enemy shinobi at the same time. We can't let them do all the work, we have to attack as well. Kujira said, having watched Koyuki, Kimimaro, and Haku take the lead. All right. Rokuro agreed before he set his sights on one of the remaining enemy shinobi. However, Rokuro's words were more bark than bite, as the cloud shinobi charged forwards, drawing her sword as she prepared to cut him down with a single strike. Rokuro's legs had already started shaking as he held his kunai in both hands, trying to find his will to fight. Look out. Kujira shouted, quickly dashing in front of him with his arm raised to block the sword attack. The cloud shinobi looked surprised that he had stopped her sword with his bare arm, not understanding how he had done it. However, she quickly pushed away with a swift kick to his chest, using the force to push clear from counter range. Get it together, Rokuro. Kujira said, not looking back at him as he focused on his enemy. We can't beat them like this, we need to retreat. The girl said after a moment, having taken in her surroundings and seeing that almost all of the others had been defeated or killed. I agree. The other surviving cloud ninja said, having watched his teammate be killed thanks to Koyuki's paper bomb. These guys are no ordinary shinobi. We need to get this intel back to base. The male shinobi then said, seeing his opening to escape. Where do you think you are going? A voice suddenly said, taking both him and the girl off guard. Who said that? The male cloud ninja asked, even as he was falling through the air, landing on a tree branch. Did you really think you killed me? The voice said, this time taking shape in the form of Chika. You. But we killed you. He said, not understanding how she had survived their first surprise attack, having watched her go down himself. Idiot. Normal attacks don't work on me. Chika said before allowing her body to burst into water around both of the remaining cloud shinobi, trapping them in a water prison jutsu. Nice. Koyuki said, watching her handiwork from the ground below. All right, Chika. Kujira also shouted, slapping his bicep proud of his squad mate. Suddenly a powerful explosion caught all of their attention, diverting their eyes over to where Kimimaro was still fighting the other stone shinobi. Is he still fighting them? I thought he would have dealt with them by now. Koyuki asked, placing her hands on her hips. Kimimaro watched as both the large pieces of rock came crashing towards him, threatening to squash him in the middle of them. At the last second, Kimimaro jumped into the air, kicking his foot off of one of the earth walls coming towards him before pushing off of it, allowing him to jump high enough into the air that he avoided being crushed. Both the pillars smashed into each other, kicking up a massive amount of debris and spraying chunks of rocks and mud all over the place, making it seem as if Kimimaro had indeed been trapped in the jutsu. Did you get him? The other stone shinobi asked, keeping his eyes peeled while trying to see through the dust cloud. I think so. The jutsu caster said, also trying to keep an eye out for him just in case. Stab. A bone blade suddenly burst through the jutsu caster's chest, taking him completely off guard and horrifying the other shinobi. How? The stone shinobi asked as he coughed blood out of his mouth. It's simple really. I'm just better than you. Kimimaro said before he pulled his blade from the man's chest, allowing him to drop to the ground into a pool of blood. No. No. I'm out of here. The other stone shinobi yelled as he tried to scramble away, falling over before picking himself up and making a break for it. It would seem we have a runaway, Haku said as he appeared behind Kimimaro, watching the stone shinobi try and get away. Shouldn't we stop him? Koyuki then added, crossing her arms over her chest. I guess we could get some intel into the enemy's plans if we did. Haku then said as he flashed his senbon needles between his hands. Yeah, let's do that. That's the end of this chapter. Happy update day and hope you are all keeping well. See you again soon. Chapter 139, Chapter 139. Haku and the others all stood around the last surviving stone shinobi that they had captured. Haku of course had stuck him with a senbon needle in the back of the neck, causing all of his body to go limp from his neck down. What the hell is this? I won't talk no matter what, you can't make me you missed bastards. He said, turning his head so he could see what was going on. Tell us what you know and we will let you live. Kimimaro simply said, not wasting any time. Ha. You think I would believe that? Perhaps a little pain will break his will. Koyuki said, a smile forming on her face as she said it. Or genjutsu. Rokuro said, butting in. I don't think any of us know genjutsu of that level, Haku said, getting a small nod from the rest of the group in agreement. Pain it is. Koyuki then said, punching her open palm as she stepped forwards, getting a nervous expression on the stone shinobi's face. Meanwhile. How did these bastards manage to get one up on us like this? Hattori shouted, seeing that he and his squad had been surrounded on all sides by grass, stone, and cloud shinobi. So many of them too. A shinobi from the hidden leaf who had been placed on Hattori's squad said. Yuri also stood with her guard up, having deflected a flurry of shuriken that had been aimed at her and the others, proving she had grown stronger thanks to her training. Leave this to me, Hattori said as he drew his sword, and kept a kunai in the other hand. All right men, let's finish them off. One of the cloud shinobi yelled, wanting to press their advance even more. However, as he was about to finish his sentence, a blade shot right through his mouth, splattering blood everywhere and shocking the others. Who? What in the? The others yelled as they watched their comrade drop to the ground, only seeing a blur left behind as Hattori used his swift style to quickly disappear behind another enemy, slicing his sword down across his back and throwing his kunai at another in an instant. Who the hell is this guy? How is he moving so fast? Hattori was moving way too quickly for them to keep up with his speed, taking all of them out in a matter of seconds without breaking a sweat. Wow, who the hell is this guy? One of the leaf shinobi asked, seeing that he was indeed impressive. His name is Hattori. And he's not the only one who has gotten stronger. Another said as he activated his eyes, allowing them to turn red. Sharingan. And now, fire style, fireball jutsu. A large fireball was suddenly flung across the battlefield, smashing right into where a unit of grass shinobi had been standing, forcing them all to jump into the air to avoid the fire style. Hattori watched the leaf ninja attack once he had finished with the enemy ninja from his side, already knowing who it was. Isito Uchiha. Look out. One of the grass shinobi shouted before they all jumped into the air. We should press on the attack a little more and get out of here. Clearly, our ambush has failed. One of the grass ninja yelled as they all landed, knowing they didn't need to take any more casualties. Agreed. Another of them said, who appeared to be the leader. I don't think so. Isito suddenly yelled as he appeared in the middle of the group, sweeping down with his right leg and using his left arm to support his weight on the ground. What in the? One of the grass shinobi yelled before he felt his legs get swept from under him thanks to Isito's kick. Isito wasn't finished there either as he took two more down to the ground before going for the kill with the kunai in his hand, only to be stopped at the last second by another of the grass shinobi who quickly countered by throwing a handful of shuriken at him, forcing Isito to deflect them and jump out of the way from another grass ninja's punch. Change of plans, retreat. The grass shinobi leader yelled, quickly tossing a smoke bomb onto the ground as he and his men retreated back into the forest. Hattori had taken care of his side, clearly being too much for the low-level enemy shinobi that had been sent to ambush them. Looks like we aren't the only ones. One of the surviving leaf shinobi said, pointing out the smoke from Kimimura's flare. So, what now? Isito asked, putting his kunai away and letting his Sharingan revert back to his normal eyes. I just received a message from squad leader Kakashi. Another said. Well, go on. Hattori then said, growing impatient as he waited to hear it. Right. He said that the middle and rear sections are under attack and that the front of the platoon has continued on their path towards the land of waterfall. Hattori raised an eyebrow. Is that all? No. We are to regroup with as many survivors as possible and deal with the threat. Once that is complete, we can continue towards the land of waterfalls. The leaf shinobi finished. All right then. Let's get a move on. Hattori then said, taking charge of the squad without a care in the world. So, that was their plan all along. Koyuki said slowly as she wiped the blood from her kunai. Geez, Koyuki. Did you have to do it like that? Rokuro said, trying not to gag at the sight of the stone ninja's body. I got our information, didn't I? She countered, not seeming fazed in the slightest. I forget how much you enjoy violence sometimes. Haku then said, not seeming to care either as it was part of the mission. Regardless of our methods, we have our intel. And we should get this to Ganryu as fast as we can. Kimimaro then said, getting everyone's attention. Right. They all said, gathering their thoughts. Ganryu's unit is at the rear of our platoon. So we should start heading south, and help any other squads that we come across. Kimimaro said, laying out the new plan. Roger that. Everyone else said, especially Kajira, who was still eager to show the others that he refused to be left in the dust. Okay then, let's move out. Kimimaro then said, getting a nod from the others as they all dashed into the trees, heading south towards the sounds of battle. Sir, we can confirm that's the last of the enemy shinobi here. A Miss Chunin spoke to Kogetsu. Yes, good work, man. Kogetsu then said, making sure that the rest of his squad could also hear his praise. What next, Ganryu? Kogetsu then asked, looking over to their leader. Ganryu, of course, was sitting on the dead body of a cloud shinobi as he finished his smoke, not having a care in the world as usual. Next. Isn't that clear? He said, taking another puff of his smoke before speaking again. We head north as planned, taking down every enemy we come across and gathering our allies. Once that is done, we will head to the land of waterfalls as planned. He said, laying out the plan to the others. All right then, let's move out, Kogetsu said, giving the order to move. Suddenly Ganryu felt a chill run down his spine, forcing him to lead back as far as he could until he was led flat on the ground. The sudden swipe of a sword flashed over his face, causing his eyes to open wide before he flipped over backwards, drawing his own sword as he blocked a downward slash, forcing him to use all of his strength to hold his own sword, feeling the back of it press down into his shoulder. Ganryu. Kogetsu shouted, cursing himself for not noticing more enemies sooner before he quickly rushed forwards to help. You. Ganryu said, getting a good look at the men who had suddenly tried to kill him, realizing that his cigarette had been cut in half, knowing he was almost a goner there. Long time no see, Ganryu. The men said in his deep voice. Zabuza Momochi. Ganryu also said, feeling the strength behind his attack as he faced the demon of the mist himself. Alright, that's the end of this chapter. I'm sorry to leave you on such a cliffhanger, but more to come soon. Chapter 140, Ganryu vs Zabuza. Ganryu could feel the pressure from Zabuza's sword pressing down on him, sinking his knees into the soil below. Zabuza. Ganryu said, glaring at him in an effort to resist. You've improved, Ganryu. I didn't expect you to be able to dodge that first attack. Zabuza said as he put even more weight into his blade, trying to crush Ganryu completely. A lot has changed since you left the village, demon. Ganryu shouted before letting the paper bombs channel to the edge of his blast sword, causing Zabuza to raise an eyebrow. Boom. The blast sword exploded, creating a large cloud of black smoke before both of them burst off from either side, sliding along the ground until they came to a halt. I see you now wield the executioner's blade. I take it Juzo is dead then. Ganryu said as he took his sword in both hands, getting ready for a tough fight. Quick as always, Ganryu, Zabuza said as he lifted his sword and dropped it onto his shoulder to rest it. Ganryu. Kogetsu shouted as he dashed to his side, instantly knowing who Zabuza was. Why is he here? Kogetsu asked as he watched Zabuza carefully, also making sure that Ganryu was unharmed. I'm not sure, but whatever his reason, he clearly means to kill me, Ganryu said, knowing that much. Let me take him, his physical ability will be no match for my jutsu, Kogetsu said, knowing that his body was immune to physical attacks. Ganryu also knew that was true, but something told him that this was something he would have to do by himself. No. You help the others. Ganryu said while standing tall. But. No buts, Kogetsu. I will handle this myself. What's the matter? Can't decide who wants to die first. Zabuza said, wearing a large smirk beneath his bandaged face. I will be your opponent, Zabuza. And unlike Lord Mizukage, I will not spare your life. Ganryu shouted, taking a fighting stance as he gathered his chakra into the soles of his feet. Zabuza snarled at Ganryu's words and lifted his huge sword, pointing it at Ganryu with a single arm as if it was nothing. I'm going to make light work you. Kogetsu didn't like it, but Ganryu was the boss, so he had no choice other than to respect his wishes and leave him to fight alone, heading off to help the other Chunin who were still fighting against some stone shinobi. Both swordsmen stared at each other, with neither of them blinking once. Circling one another like a shark would its prey. Arg. Zabuza yelled, not being able to wait any longer to attack, confirming Ganryu's thoughts as he had already planned ahead. Impatient as ever, Zabuza. Ganryu said as he blocked the overhead strike, letting his blast sword make contact with the paper bombs before it exploded. Zabuza was quick to dash back and avoid the explosion on impact, seeing that there was no damage to his blade before he attacked again. You think that weak sword stands a chance against me? Zabuza yelled, swinging his sword like a wild animal, smashing blow after blow against Ganryu's blade. Ganryu could tell what he was doing, knowing that he was trying to use the blast sword's own strength against him. Darn it, with this many paper bombs going off, I can't keep my footing. Ganryu thought, knowing that Zabuza had used the blast sword before, and therefore must have come up with a way to counter it. You're mine. Zabuza yelled, kicking out Ganryu's legs and knocking him off balance, leaving a gap in his defense. Ganryu watched as Zabuza swung his sword over his head, almost hearing the veins in his arm and shoulder expand due to the strength required of the executioner's blade. However, Ganryu had already seen this coming 2 steps ago and had decided to let Zabuza think he was winning. By letting him gain the upper hand and take him off balance, Zabuza had forgotten to watch what he was doing with his hands, and now, Ganryu was another step ahead. Suddenly the paper bombs on the blast sword ignited, posing a rather large problem for Zabuza since the blade was between his legs. When did he? Zabuza thought, hearing the sound of the paper about to explode and knowing he would be hurt badly from the position of such an explosion. At the last second, Zabuza was able to switch his stance and jump backwards, pulling the blade back as he used the length of it to cover his body and shield himself from the large explosion. Zabuza landed hard on the ground, taking a kneeling position as he watched the smoke carefully, knowing that Ganryu wouldn't have allowed himself to be caught in his own attack. Behind me. Zabuza yelled, pulling his sword around his body as he blocked a blow that was aimed for the back of his neck. Ganryu had pulled a fast one on him, having drawn his old clever sword from a scroll he kept it in on his hip, using the blast sword as a distraction while trying to take him out with his old sword. You crafty bastard. Zabuza said as he pushed Ganryu back before spinning in a 180 and using the rotation to smash his sword into Ganryu's. Ganryu was still in the air as Zabuza counterattacked, using his leg and free arm to take the weight of the blow before being sent flying. He's as strong as ever. Ganryu said to himself, flipping around in the air before doing a back handspring and picking up the blast sword that had been wedged in the ground from its own explosion. Looks like you have gotten stronger, Ganryu, Zabuza said, seeming to acknowledge Ganryu's ability. I could say the same about you, Demon of the Mist, Ganryu said as he placed his clever sword onto his back and took the blast sword in both hands. I think that is enough playing around, Ganryu, Zabuza said after a moment, growing tired of their banter. With that Zabuza stuck his sword into the ground and placed his hands together, forming a hand sign before lifting his arm into the air. Hidden Mist Jutsu. Really? Ganryu asked, also being quite skilled in the use of hiding in the mist technique. Let's see who is better, shall we? After all, only one of us will be making it out of this mist alive. Zabuza said before he disappeared into the mist, causing Ganryu to frown, knowing this wasn't going to be easy. Meanwhile, Haku, Kimimaro and the others were making their way south, back the way they had come from as they rushed towards Ganryu's squad. After they had defeated the cloud and stone shinobi that tried to ambush them, they managed to capture one alive, letting Koyuki work some of her magic on him to reveal their plan. We have to get there as quickly as we can and warn Captain Ganryu, Koyuki said, knowing that things could get bad otherwise. I can't believe that the stone would resort to such tactics. Haku also said, knowing that this mission was growing more serious. The fact that we are at war should lead to no surprise. Kimimaro then said as they dashed from tree to tree, using their chakra control to dash across the terrain at an impressive rate. But hiring him to do their dirty work. Him of all people. Koyuki said, remembering their last encounter. Zabuza. The demon of the mist. Kujira said, feeling a shiver run down his spine as he too remembered his last encounter with the monster. Come on, we need to up the pace and warn Ganryu as quickly as possible, Kimimaro said after a moment, quickly upping his pace, forcing the others to do the same. How is he so fast? Kujira thought as he tried his best to match his pace but soon realized that he wouldn't be able to. Maybe we should slow down a little, Kimimaro. The others can't handle this speed. Haku said to his brother, seeming to have no trouble in keeping up with Kimimaro. Alright. Kimimaro said, noticing that the others were falling behind before he slowed his pace so they could catch up. Geez. When did they get so fast? Rokuro asked, looking to Chika as he tried to catch his breath. Unlike us, the three of them have been training non-stop. I guess we have no choice but to step it up if we wish to not fall behind. Chika said, also noticing that Koyuki had had no trouble keeping pace with Haku and Kimimaro. I for one refuse to be left in their dust. Chapter 141, Zabuza gets serious. Hattori and his squad had now finished dealing with the remaining shinobi that had tried to ambush them, seeming to make light work of the Chunin and Genin that had been sent to attack them. So what in the hell is going on? Isito Uchiha asked as he turned to his squad mates. That's obvious, isn't it? Our enemies tried to ambush us and stop as many of us from getting to the waterfall. Hattori said as he looked at one of the dead cloud ninjas' faces. Well, in that case, shouldn't we get a move on towards the waterfall and try to regroup with other squads? Isito said, getting a nod from his own teammates in agreement. That's a great idea, Isito. Both Sino and Horaim said as they looked at him in amazement, causing Yuri to almost throw up in her mouth. Hattori was about to speak, but his senses suddenly picked up on movement and caused him to put his guard up. Hattori. A familiar voice yelled, causing him to relax just a little. Haku and the others landed on the ground next to him and the others took the Leaf Shinobi by surprise, especially Isito, who had not seen them since the Chunin exam. I see you survived the ambush too, Hattori said, not seeming surprised. Sorry but we don't have time to chat, we need to find Ganryu and fast. Koyuki said, not wasting any time as she and Kimimaro quickly took off not wasting any time. Wait, what's going on? Yuri asked as she watched them dash off. We have information that Zabuza has been hired to kill Ganryu, Kujira said as he, Rokuro and Chika also stopped to catch their breath. Right, if he's involved then we had better get moving, Hattori said, remembering how things had gone down last time. Hold on a minute, why should we go back? If anything we should press forward. Isito said, not liking the idea of heading back. You three can do whatever you want, but I'm heading back, Hattori said as he turned his back on Isito and his teammates. Wait, what? Isito said in response, looking to Haku, remembering his battle with him back in the exams. Hattori didn't bother saying another word as he quickly took off, racing towards the direction that Kimimaro and Koyuki had headed in, with Yuri following close behind him. Looks like we are all going now, Rokuro said, having caught his breath now, and feeling a little safer with the increased numbers. Come on, let's move it or we will be left behind again. Kujira said, seeming frustrated that the others had left already. Meanwhile. How long can you keep this up for? Ganryu. Zabuza yelled as he attacked with another handful of water clones, using his mist to keep his presence hidden while his clones attacked for him. Ganryu had to admit, even though they were mere water clones, their strength in numbers was giving him a hard time. Ganryu was quick to block an overhead attack from one clone, using the explosive sword to instantly counter with an explosion that took the clone down with one hit. However, another attacked not a moment after, aiming for a vital point. Shit. Ganryu said as he pulled his cleaver blade from his back, being forced to use it to block the attack before he kicked the water clone in the head, forcing it to burst into water. I'm not sure about you, but I could do this all day. Zabuza's voice said, echoing through the mist as Ganryu took a solid stance, holding both of his swords up in defense. Yeah. Well, as much as I like spending time with you, I don't. Ganryu said, quickly ducking under another slash from a water clone before he kicked its legs out from under it, making sure to go for the knee so the clone would burst from the damage. Next, Ganryu blocked another strike from his left with his cleaver sword, deflecting the attack before he smashed his blast sword into the clone's chest, creating a large explosion and blasting the other clones that were in the area away at the same time. The real Zabuza could sense that all of his clones had been caught in that explosion, leaving only him left as he hid under the cover of the mist. Darn it. I guess it's time I got involved. He thought. Did you think you were the only one who made a name for himself by using the killing in mist technique, Zabuza? Ganryu said as he suddenly appeared behind him. When did he? Zabuza thought, as he quickly pulled his sword around his back, trying his best to block the attack from Ganryu's blast sword. Boom. The blast sword connected with Zabuza's executioner's blade, sending both Zabuza and Ganryu flying back from the force of the explosion. Darn it, that sword is beginning to become a thorn in my side. Zabuza yelled as he regained his balance, checking his blade for damage and seeing a crack, causing the expression on Zabuza's face to harden even more. What's wrong, Zabuza? Did I hit a nerve? This time being Ganryu's voice that was echoing through the mist. The only thing you did was prolong your death, Zabuza said as he lowered his sword and took a deep breath. Is that so? Ganryu said as he quickly appeared out of the mist, attacking head-on as he wanted to press his advantage. With his cleaver blade, Ganryu attacked high, watching in surprise as Zabuza chose to dodge the attack by letting go of his own sword completely, stepping inside of Ganryu's stance as he pivoted on his heel, forcing Ganryu to turn as fast as he could to try and overextend his other arm in an attempt to hit him. However, Zabuza was too close to the inside of Ganryu's reach and swiftly used his fist to strike Ganryu's elbow joint, hyperextending it and forcing him to lose his grip on his weapon. Agar. Ganryu grunted, having no choice but to bite through the pain as he tried turning the other way so he could attack with his cleaver blade again. I don't think so. Zabuza yelled, quickly ramming his elbow into Ganryu's shoulder to stop his attack while also grabbing his shirt with his other hand. Take this. Zabuza yelled as he turned his hips and pulled him over his shoulder before slamming him into the ground with a perfectly executed throw. Agar. Ganryu grunted as he hit the ground, feeling the air get smashed out of him on impact, struggling to breath. Now you die. Zabuza yelled as he reached over to his sword, taking the handle in his grasp. Ganryu couldn't move thanks to that throw, feeling as if his back had just broken from the force of it. Shit. I can't move. Ganryu thought, watching as Zabuza was about to deliver the final blow. Wind burst jutsu. Suddenly a huge burst of wind style let rip, blowing all of the mist away in one fell swoop, distracting Zabuza for a split second before he realized he was under attack. I don't think so. Zabuza yelled, quickly turning around as he attacked with his sword, feeling it slice through the flesh of whoever it was. Wait, what? Zabuza said as he saw his blade pass right through the person's body, not seeming to have any effect whatsoever. Sorry, but that won't work on me. Kogetsu said as he attacked with his own sword, catching Zabuza across the chest with a good blow as it drew blood. You bastard. Zabuza yelled as he jumped back to create some distance. He must be from the Hozuki clan. Zabuza thought as he watched him carefully. Ganryu, are you okay? Kogetsu asked, quickly kneeling down next to him so he could get a good look. I've been better. Yeah, I can see that much. Kogetsu said as he turned his attention back to Zabuza. It's over now, you can't beat both of us, Kogetsu said, taking a strong stance as Ganryu slowly got back up too. Maybe, maybe not. Zabuza said, not seeming to care that Kogetsu had joined the fight. 2 against 1. I guess now I can get serious. Zabuza said as he cracked his neck. Kogetsu didn't like this and had a strange feeling about the situation. This isn't good, Ganryu said, getting a strange look from Kogetsu. What do you mean? Ganryu took a good look at Zabuza, seeming to see him slightly differently now than he had done before. This isn't the same Zabuza that we knew. No. He's gotten much stronger than the last time I saw him. Ganryu said. I guess he wasn't called the Demon of the Mist for nothing, Kogetsu said, having only heard the stories. Now. It's time to show you what a real demon looks like. Zabuza yelled, letting his demon aura burst to life as his chakra took form above him, creating a visible demonic aura. I'll show you my true power. That's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed and as always, have a great day. Chapter 142, Zabuza's True Power. I'll show you what a true demon looks like. Zabuza shouted as his aura flared to life taking form over his head. What the hell is that? Kogetsu asked. His chakra. I can see it. First time Ganryu said, not making light of the situation even though it sounded like it. This isn't good, he's about to attack. And this time, he's not going to hold back. Ganryu said, trying to formulate a plan. I'll take him head on. His attacks won't hurt me. Kogetsu suddenly said as he charged forwards alone, knowing that he could only use physical attacks against him. Zabuza didn't waste any time and charged forward, seeming to move much faster than he had before. Arg! Zabuza yelled as he swung his sword with great strength. The force of his attack was so strong that Kogetsu's arms burst into water as his muscles gave way. However, Zabuza's sword sliced right through his body as it also burst into water, allowing the attack to have no effect on him. As I thought. Kogetsu said, suddenly wrapping his body around Zabuza as he appeared behind his head with a kunai drawn. Your attacks no matter how strong won't work on me. He said with a pointed smile on his face. Is that right? Zabuza said, not seeming worried about what was happening. Kogetsu didn't waste time with any more questions and thrust his kunai down towards Zabuza's neck, going for the kill. However, Kogetsu had suddenly become immobile as an electric current passed through it, causing him to wince in pain while losing control of his transformation. Lightning style. Kogetsu said in shock, quite literally. Did you think I had spent all this time outside of the village doing nothing, boy? Zabuza said before his body suddenly burst with a static charge that threw Kogetsu off of him and onto the ground. Ganryu also watched what was happening from a distance, shocked that Zabuza had used lighting style, having shown no signs of being able to use it earlier in the fight. Oh crap! He said, knowing he would have to stop him before he killed Kogetsu, dashing forward as quickly as he could. Zabuza! He yelled, allowing as many paper bombs that could fit onto the edge of his blast sword to come forward. Zabuza quickly turned his attention to Ganryu and of all things decided to throw his sword, having embodied it with a powerful lightning-style churka, giving the executioner's blade an even more deadly edge. Shit! Ganryu said, knowing that he didn't have time to dodge it due to committing too much to his assault. Ha! Ganryu yelled as he cut down with his own sword, causing the paper bombs to explode with a violent shockwave, pushing him back through the air. However, before Ganryu had even landed back on the ground, Zabuza had burst out of the dust, having caught his sword mid-air and already pressing on the attack. Ganryu blocked the first attack, feeling the force of the attack was greater than any he had dealt with. That aura. Ganryu said, feeling the bloodlust that it was letting off as he tried his best to block more of Zabuza's incoming attacks. The blast sword was a powerful sword indeed. But, it was not meant for a long drawn-out battle against another stronger blade, such as the executioner's blade, putting Ganryu at a disadvantage. I have to give it to you, Ganryu. You certainly are no pushover. Zabuza yelled as he slashed down with a one-armed attack, forcing Ganryu to his knees from the force of it. But you are still no match for me. Zabuza then said, letting his lightning style engulf his sword once more, increasing the blade's cutting power. Water bullet jutsu. Kogetsu yelled, firing a barrage of small water bullets from the tips of his index fingers. The jutsu was a secret jutsu that belonged to the Hozuki clan. And it was very powerful. Zabuza quickly ducked under the water bullets, having spotted the danger at the last second. As he did, he turned his body and slammed a powerful kick into Ganryu's chest, sending him flying back from the force of it before he threw a kunai at Kogetsu. Kogetsu could see that lightning style that was wrapped around it and quickly dashed out of the way, knowing he wouldn't be able to let it just hit him as he would with a normal kunai. Not fast enough, brat. Zabuza yelled as he seemed to close the distance between them faster than Kogetsu had anticipated. No, his speed has increased by this much too. Kogetsu said, watching as his sword came swinging towards him, also wrapped in a lightning-style cloak, meaning that it would most likely kill Kogetsu if it hit. I can't block it. Game over. Zabuza's sword swung down with no mercy, intending to sever Kogetsu's head from his shoulders. Zabuza. An unfamiliar voice roared before its owner appeared between the two of them at impressive speed. Zabuza felt his attack become wedged as whatever or whoever it was stopped his attack, seeming to counter it somehow. What? Zabuza said, taking only a second to see what had happened, as did Kogetsu, who had expected to be dead right now. Kimimaro. Kogetsu said in surprise as he looked the boy up and down. Kimimaro stood strong with the bones in his arms sticking out, also seeming to be encased in a lighting-style aura as they held back the mighty cutting power of the executioner's blade. You. Zabuza said, recognizing the brat in an instant. Kimimaro also frowned at Zabuza as he felt the weight of his sword press down on him even more, doing his best to hold the demon of the mist back. Zabuza was no fool and knew all too well this kid's abilities. Quickly jumping back as he sensed danger, avoiding a barrage of bones that had shot out from Kimimaro's ribs. Zabuza also noticed that the boy had used lightning style just as he had to negate his blade's effect. Looks like he's gotten stronger, Zabuza said as he landed back on the ground. Kimimaro. What are you doing here? Kogetsu suddenly asked, looking at the boy's back. We came to help. But looks like we got here too late to warn you. Kimimaro said, not taking his eyes off Zabuza. What do you mean? Kogetsu asked. We got intel from one of the enemies, saying that the stone had hired an assassin to take out the leaders of our unit before we arrived in the land of waterfalls. Kimimaro said. Kogetsu understood right away and turned his attention back to Zabuza. So you rushed back here to warn us. Ganryu had also gotten back up to his feet now, having taken a direct kick to the chest from Zabuza and been stunned by its power. He's much stronger than I remember. Ganryu said as he slowly walked over towards Kimimaro and Kogetsu. Yeah. And with that lightning style, my Keki Genkai is useless. Kogetsu said, knowing he would be in big trouble if he was hit by it. Kimimaro. As happy as I am to see you, you shouldn't be here. Ganryu said while still clutching his chest. Zabuza took a good look at the three of them, knowing that fighting all three of them would be a challenge, but still within his ability. Do you really think that this brat will be able to make a difference against me? Zabuza said, as his Akatsuki cloak blew in the wind. Ganryu and the others didn't reply, knowing that this was going to be dangerous. Who said it was just us? Kimimaro suddenly said, wearing a smirk on his face. Zabuza took his words to mind and instantly scanned the area, knowing that these brats always traveled in packs. Zabuza. Hattori suddenly yelled, bursting out of the tree line with great speed. Bingo, Zabuza said as Hattori appeared behind him, coated in his steel release as he slammed a kick into the back of his head. However, Zabuza's body burst into water, causing Hattori to land on the ground in surprise, straining his eyes as he looked all over for him. Where are you? Hattori yelled, letting his anger get the better of him. Hattori, calm down. Haku suddenly yelled as he and the others also arrived. What are you all doing here? Ganryu yelled, knowing he should have known. Perfect. All of you brats are back together. This time, I won't let a single one of you escape. Zabuza said, remaining hidden and allowing his voice to echo through the trees. Everyone, back-to-back formation, now. Ganryu yelled, not wanting to give him the chance to attack before they were ready. Time to finish this, once and for all, Zabuza said, suddenly appearing in the middle of Haku, Koyuki, and Kimimaro with his sword ready to kill them all. Look out you three. Ganryu and Kogetsu yelled, knowing they couldn't move fast enough to help them. However, everyone, especially Zabuza, who was shocked at what happened next. The three of them had managed to not only stop Zabuza's attack but had managed to disarm the swordsman, seeming to do the impossible. What? Zabuza yelled, watching as Kimimaro managed to knock his sword out of his hands with his bones, while Haku had been able to freeze his feet to the ground and now Koyuki was about to go for the finishing blow with the kunai to his throat. Don't underestimate me you brats. Zabuza suddenly yelled as his demonic aura grew even larger, seeming to let out its own pressure and shockwave that knocked all three of them back. What in the world was that? Ganryu said, having sworn he had seen the demon aura above Zabuza attack on its own. Regroup. Haku said, feeling the danger that was coming from Zabuza now as he quickly used his ice mirrors to slip both Kimimaro and Koyuki to safety. However, Zabuza didn't chase them and instead simply picked up his sword from the ground where it had been lodged in. I'm going to enjoy spilling your blood, and returning your heads to your pathetic father. Zabuza said, looking at them with a powerful glare that seemed to freeze all of them on the spot. What's going on? Kujira and Chika said, feeling that they were paralyzed on the spot. Genjutsu? Kogetsu asked, knowing that it wasn't that. No. It's just his aura. Ganryu said, struggling to free himself from his gaze. Time for you all to die. Zabuza said, now having gotten serious as he was about to pull out all of the stops to kill them, making sure that he got the job done this time. End of chapter. Thank you for all of your support and as always have a great day. Chapter 143, Battle with Zabuza finished. I can't move. Haku said, feeling as if his body was frozen on the spot. Kimimaro and the others also felt the effects, not understanding what was going on. Am I scared? Hattori asked himself, watching as the demon Zabuza slowly walked over towards him, feeling his legs shaking as he got closer. No. He has to pay. I won't let him get away with it. He roared, forcing his arm to move. Hattori forced himself to move and stabbed himself in the leg to snap his body out of whatever was going on, freeing his body in the process. Zabuza quickly lunged forwards with a swipe of his sword, surprised that he missed his attack when Hattori ducked under it. However, he didn't waste time in complimenting the boy and quickly countered Hattori's attempt to counterattack with a powerful front kick to the chest, sending him crashing back into the trees with serious force. Hattori. Yuri yelled, also still frozen on the spot as she tried her best to get to his side, being unable to move like the others. You're next. Zabuza said as he fixed his attention on the girl, wanting to sever their bond with his blade. Yuri, look out. Ganryu suddenly yelled, having been able to free himself from Zabuza's jutsu. Ganryu was quick to lift his sword in an attempt to block Zabuza's attack, but it was simply too strong as it knocked the explosive blade out of the way with ease and cut Ganryu down the chest. Ganryu. Kogetsu yelled, forcing himself to break free and charge to his defense. What do you know? Down with only a single strike. Zabuza said, not even bothering to look at Kogetsu before he let a lightning-style clone emerge and attack him head-on. Ganryu was on his knees now, breathing heavily as he tried to conserve his life force. This fight isn't over yet. Zabuza, he said, spitting out some blood onto the ground. Kimimaro and the others also watched as Zabuza stood over Ganryu, lifting his sword as he got ready to deliver the final blow, each of them feeling helpless as whatever was holding them in place remained strong. That's enough. Kimimaro said, growing angry at the fact he felt useless. I won't let this carry on. He said again, allowing a red chakra cloak to cover his body with a single tail emerging from the result. Zabuza could sense the sudden increase in chakra and turned around, only to be met with a powerful punch that connected right on his jaw. Kimimaro had broken free of the jutsu that was holding everyone in place with the help of the Three Tails chakra. Bursting to life as he rushed over as quickly as he could and punched Zabuza in the face with everything he had. Zabuza was shocked by the power behind the boy's attack, feeling the force of it take him off his feet before he slammed through the stump of a tree, something that required a large amount of force. Everyone was amazed at what they had just witnessed and soon felt their bodies become free again as the jutsu Zabuza had used on them wore off. You did it. Haku said, quickly making some hand signs as he rushed over to Ganryu. Quickly, we need to get him out of here into the hidden waterfall. Haku then shouted, being quickly followed by Koyuki who was thinking the same thing. What the hell was that jutsu? Koyuki also asked, taking a look at the damage to Ganryu. Kujira and the others were shocked by Kimimaro's sudden appearance, but quickly shook it off as Kogetsu barked orders, seeing as Zabuza's clone had also disappeared, leaving him free to take control of the situation. We need to get out of here before he gets back up, Kogetsu said, taking one of Ganryu's arms after assessing the damage. Don't worry about me, Ganryu said, spitting out more blood. We won't leave you behind. Chika and Kujira yelled as they also ran over to help, feeling a little useless at the moment. Quickly. Kogetsu shouted, getting everyone to make a move as they jumped into the trees. Kimimaro released his chakra cloak and joined the others, looking back to see if Zabuza was giving chase. Yuri had rushed straight to Hattori's side to check on him after taking a powerful kick from Zabuza. He had managed to use his steel release at the last second to avoid death, but his body was still injured. We need to get out of here quickly, Yuri said as she helped him up. Hattori nodded, ashamed to admit that even after his training, he was still no match for the demon of the mist. Meanwhile, Zabuza's eyes slowly came back into focus once his head had stopped spinning. Realizing he had taken a direct hit from the boy and as a result, had been sent flying so hard he had smashed through the trees before finally becoming imprinted into one strong enough to withstand the force. That was some power. Zabuza said, giving a compliment where a compliment was due. However, his rage soon took over before he ripped his arms free of the tree and took his sword in his hand. Don't think I will let you get away with that, brat. Now. Zabuza. A voice suddenly said from the shadows, alerting Zabuza to the owner's presence. You. He said, already knowing who it was. What do you want, Zetsu? Zabuza said as he turned to look at the strange being. We simply came to find you, after watching your fight with the Three Tails that is. White Zetsu said. You were toying with your prey again. Black Zetsu then said. Whatever, Zabuza said, placing his sword on his back. That boy. He is the Three Tails Jinchuriki. White Zetsu then said, causing Zabuza's eyes to open a little wider. So. He made his own boy a Jinchuriki. That explains why he packed such a punch. Zabuza then said, having all the pieces come together. The mission has changed. Black Zetsu said, getting the demon's attention. You are to capture the Three Tails, and bring him in. Zabuza remained silent, knowing that they would be heading towards the land of waterfalls now, and would be sheltered by the hidden village and its forces. That won't be easy, Zabuza said. We know. That is why our leader is sending you help. White Zetsu then said. Zabuza didn't say anything, knowing that if Pain had made this decision, then there was nothing he could say to change that. Kakuzu and a new member will be here in a few days. Until then, we suggest you rest. White Zetsu then said before both of them slowly slipped into the ground, leaving Zabuza alone again. Zabuza didn't say anything and instead looked through the clearing of trees that his body had created from the force of Kimimaro's attack. Just you wait, brat. Next time, you won't make it out alive. Haku and the others had cleared quite a bit of distance now, and although he could sense they were not being followed, he still checked his rear to make sure that was so. Looks like he isn't chasing us, Koyuki said, feeling reassured about that. Yeah, looks like Kimimaro really did a number on him. Chika shouted. Hattori remained silent, having found out it was Kimimaro who had delivered a powerful blow and managed to save everyone, not helping being able to feel a little jealous of him. Now isn't the time to celebrate. This area is still crawling with enemy shinobi, so make sure to be on your guard. Kogetsu said, taking charge of the unit due to Ganryu being out of commission. How much further? Rokuro asked, also keeping a close eye out for any enemies. We still have a way to go, Haku said, having already studied the terrain in the reports before the mission. If my calculations are correct, we are still a few hours away from our destination. Rokuro also said. Let's just hope he had hold on for that long. Kogetsu then said after looking at Ganryu. Meanwhile, Isito Uchiha and his squad had broken off from Hattori and Yuki. After Hattori had sensed Zabuza's chakra, he instantly dashed off without so much as an explanation, leaving the leaf ninja behind. Isito and the others had decided to carry on towards the land of waterfalls, as per Kakashi's orders. However, that was proving easier said than done. Many of the enemies were still roaming about as they preyed on the stragglers. Unfortunately, many of the Leaf and Mist Genin had fallen for the surprise attack, leaving the Chunin outnumbers and overwhelmed. Hey look! A stone shinobi said as he pointed up. Looks like those babies survived the ambush. A grass shinobi said as he noticed Isito and his squad jumping through the trees above them before he dropped the dead body of the Leaf Genin he had been tormenting. Mind if we take M out? The grass shinobi said, looking to the squad of stone shinobi who were with them. Be our guest. The leader said, not seeming to care. Excellent. That's the end of this chapter. Thank you for reading, I hope you are all well. Until next time. Chapter 144, Chapter 144, Introducing Shinobu Jishin. Isito and his squad were currently jumping through the trees as they made their way to the land of waterfalls. Sino, how much further? Isito asked looking at his teammate. Not much further now, Isito. She said, being the navigator of the team. Isito was the only member of his squad to be promoted to Chunin after the Chunin exams. Sino and Horaim had not made the cut this time but had been trying to work harder and follow Isito's lead. Naturally, Isito being an Uchiha had much more potential hidden within him than they did, but they were still working hard to catch up to him. Sino, a sensory type, felt a sudden tingle in the back of her neck, quickly alerting the others to her suspicion, allowing Horaim to block an overhead attack that would have left her kissing the dirt. Horaim, look out! Isito shouted as he rushed to her defense, quickly slamming a kick into the grass shinobi's face with impressive power. Why you? Another of them said, revealing to the leaf ninja that they had been surrounded. Don't let them get away. The leader of the grass shinobi said before he pulled out a handful of shuriken from his weapons pouch. I'll make short work of all of you. Isito shouted, letting his Sharingan come to life. Isito jumped to the front and easily deflected the shuriken that the grass shinobi had thrown at him, seeming to move too fast for them to keep up with. Isito wasn't done there though as he flipped in the air and threw a handful of his shuriken, using them to deflect the ones he had already deflected to change their trajectory. What in the? This kid is an Uchiha. All of the shuriken moved as if they had a mind of their own, hitting each and every grass shinobi in the chest before Isito even landed back onto the ground. Wow, Isito, you did it again. Sino cheered. Of course I did, Isito said, not having even broken a sweat. Not bad, kid. Now, how about you fight some real ninja? Another, much deeper voice said, taking all three of them off guard. Isito and the others looked at the group that was surrounding them, trying to weigh up the situation they now found themselves in. This isn't good. These guys seem a lot stronger than the others. Sino said, being able to sense as much. Looks at them, just kids. One of the stone ninja said. Have the leaf really resorted to sending children to do their work? Another asked, mocking them. Hey, I've got an idea. The leader of the stone ninja suddenly said. Hey, Shinobu. The leader of the stone ninja suddenly shouted. A moment after a young stone shinobi stepped forward, seeming to be around the same age as Isito and the others. He wore the standard stone ninja uniform. He had dark medium-length hair and a somewhat plain expression on his face. There he is. Shinobu, these brats look around the same age as you, why don't you show them what you can do? Shinobu didn't seem bothered and simply nodded. Who the hell is this guy? Isito thought, looking the kid up and down. Whatever, he doesn't look that tough. Isito yelled, quickly throwing a barrage of shuriken at him. However, Shinobu simply dodged them without much effort. I'm looking forward to this. One of the stone ninja said. Yeah, I heard that kid passed the Chunin exam on his own. Another of them said. This should be good sport. Isito and the others overheard their conversation and knew that this wouldn't be an easy battle. We need to work together to take this guy out, Sino said, getting a nod from both Isito and Horaim. Alright, let's go with Formation B. Isito said, getting a nod from both the girls as they prepared. Horaim pulled two kunai from her weapons pouch and threw them at Shinobu, but not before Isito dashed forwards, somehow matching the speed of the kunai. Let's see how you handle this. Aisito said as he jumped into the air, watching as Shinobu slowly moved out of the way of the kunai again. Now. Transformation Jutsu. Sino said as she made a hand sign. Both of the kunai suddenly burst into smoke, transforming into copies of Sino before they both jumped toward Shinobu, grabbing both of his arms and restraining him. We got him. Now Aisito. Sino shouted. I'm on it. He said, falling through the air above Shinobu. Now, fire style. Fireball Jutsu. He yelled as he made the hand signs and unleashed his jutsu. The fireball connected with the ground and exploded, creating a huge blast of smoke. The smoke from the explosion covered the area and the view of Aisito and the others. Aisito landed back onto the ground as he admired his handiwork, keeping a smile on his face as he waited to see the result of their combined attack. The dust soon settled and Shinobu was nowhere to be seen, confusing Aisito and the others. Where is he? Sino asked, trying to see if she could sense him. I don't know. Keep on your toes. Aisito said, keeping the kunai in his hand close by and ready. Suddenly a hand burst from underground as it grabbed Horaim's leg from underneath her. Horaim yelled as both he and Sino watched her get dragged underground so that only her head was left sticking out. He's underground. Sino suddenly yelled. Aisito had already realized that but wasn't sure what he could do about it before he rushed over to Horaim to try and help her. Earth Style. Sismic Jutsu, Level 2. Shinobu said before he burst back up from the ground and placed both of his hands on the ground. What is he doing? Sino asked, never having heard of this kind of jutsu. The ground started to shake in a violent manner before it began to break apart and travel toward the group of leaf shinobi. Look out. Aisito shouted as he jumped into the air, avoiding the attack before throwing his kunai at Shinobu. Sino also jumped into the air and avoided the attack. However, Horaim was still trapped underground and was hit by the full force of the attack, being blasted by the earth itself as it disrupted her, sending her flying into the air. Horaim. Sino yelled. Watching as her friend dropped back onto the soil hard before sliding along the dirt covered in bruises. Meanwhile, the other stone shinobi watched from the sidelines, keeping tabs on the current battle between their own and the leaf. Looks like Shinobu is starting to get warmed up. One of them said, crossing his arms over his chest. I've had enough of this guy. Aisito said, deciding to engage him in close-range combat. Let's see how you handle this. He then said before he dashed forwards, intending to close the gap. Shinobu watched as Aisito got closer and led back to avoid the slash that followed from his kunai. Aisito wasn't done there and twisted around, throwing a spinning heel kick which Shinobu was forced to block with his left arm. Now. Aisito yelled, giving Sino the signal. Sino quickly jumped into the air as she threw a volley of shuriken with both hands toward them both. Shinobu could see at least 10 coming toward them and knew he couldn't dodge them with Aisito trying to attack him at the same time. I don't think so. Aisito yelled as he threw a combination of punches and kicks, preventing Shinobu from making any hand signs. Being forced to block the incoming taijutsu attacks instead. Damn this guy, Shinobu said before a punch suddenly connected with his face, having slipped past his guard. Aisito felt his left hand connect and used this to take a step back and jump out of the way of the shuriken. Sino watched as Aisito left it until the last minute, jumping and twirling in the air as he used his Sharingan to avoid the projectiles, managing to see them coming in almost slow motion. The shuriken flew past Aisito as they cut through the air, piercing into Shinobu's body with a dull thud over and over again. Got him. Sino said as she watched them hit him. However, Shinobu's body burst into mud before it started to decay and melt. No way. Aisito said, realizing he must have made a clone when he came back up from underground. Even my Sharingan didn't see it. Now it's about to get good. The leader of the stone shinobi said, wearing a sinister smile on his face. Earth Style, Systemic Jutsu Level 5. Shinobu suddenly said, taking both Aisito and Sino by surprise. Sino, look out. Aisito shouted before the ground around them burst and cracked, exploding all around them as if they had been hit by an earthquake. Rocks and earth were blasted all over and the ground had been disrupted so severely that the area was unrecognizable, leaving both Aisito and Sino nowhere to be seen. That's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for all of your support and have a great weekend. Chapter 145, Chapter 145. Kimimaro and the others were trying their best to escort Ganryu, who had been badly injured in their fight against Zabuza, to the hidden waterfall village. So far, the group could slip past most enemies without being seen. Fortunately for them, the ones who didn't live very long. How much further? Koyuki asked. It's not far now, we should be coming up on the secret entrance in another mile, Haku said, using his memory to its best, having been able to study the map before the mission. Good. He might not last much longer. Kogetsu added, knowing that Ganryu's wound was getting worse. Suddenly a large explosion and the feeling of the ground itself shaking caused everyone to halt their advance. Earthquake. Kujira said, trying to see what was going on. No. This isn't an earthquake. Haku then said, being able to sense the chakra of who was causing this, as well as the team who was fighting them. Isito and the others had been facing off against the stone shinobi that had surrounded them, deciding to pit them against one of their own for a bit of sport before killing them off. However, the three of them quickly realized that Shinobu was no normal ninja. And together, the three of them had paid the price for underestimating him. Isito now stood alone, feeling beaten and worthless, finding himself at the mercy of Shinobu, who had used his earth-style jutsu to completely overwhelm him and his teammates. Sino. Horaim. Isito said as he searched for the bodies of his friends. Damn, Shinobu did it again. One of the stone ninja said, whistling as he said it. Yes. He is indeed a gifted shinobi. The leader of the stone ninja said, keeping his arms crossed over his chest as he waited to see what he would do next. You son of a bitch. Isito said before he looked at Shinobu, using his hands to form some hand signs at a slow pace, showing how exhausted he was from the battle so far. It's no use. This fight is over. Shinobu said, using his earth style to suddenly trap Isito as the ground around him seemed to swallow him whole, leaving only his head free. I take no pleasure in your death, Shinobu said as he slowly approached Isito, standing over him and looking down at him without any emotion. Isito was unable to move and felt helpless, knowing full well that this was the end of the line for him. Uchiha or not. However, Shinobu stopped his final attack at the last second, taking only a moment before he turned around on his heels and deflected 3 shuriken that would have hit him in the back of the neck and head. Both Chika and Kujira landed on the ground as they revealed themselves to Shinobu and the other stone shinobi. Looks like we have more bugs to squash. One of the other stone ninja said, seeing the surprise attack from the 2 mist ninjas. Looks like we can finally get stuck in. Another said, seeming excited for battle. Their faces soon changed when ice burst from their feet, giving them but a second to scream before they were swallowed whole by it, forever encased in their new frozen grave. All but the leader of the group and one other had been caught in the surprise attack, making the leader of the stone ninja very aware that Kujira and Chika were only decoys. It's an ambush, retreat. The stone leader said, saying it loud enough so Shinobu could also hear him. Looks like you got lucky today, Shinobu said before turning to look at Isito. But next time I will finish you. Isito could feel the rage burning inside of him, trying to force himself free from the ground, but to no avail. With that, Shinobu suddenly sank into the ground, disappearing from everyone's view as he made his escape with expert skill. Let them go. Kogetsu quickly yelled as he watched both Haku and Kimimaro about to make chase. Both of them stopped, obeying his order without question and let the remaining stone shinobi flee, even if they did wish to kill them. Retrieve the wounded and let's move out. We don't have time to chase them down. Kogetsu said, getting a nod from the others. Besides, we don't know who else is out there. Isito. Are you okay? Haku asked while helping him out of the ground. I'm fine. He said, clearly not being alright before he looked over to the others, seeing if they had found his teammates. Sino. Horaim. He yelled, trying to run forwards and not realizing his leg was hurt pretty bad, falling over before he could take 2 steps. Kimimaro had found Sino, who was alive but badly hurt. However, Horaim's body was already starting to go cold, and Koyuki simply shook her head before placing her body down. No. No, it can't be. Isito said with tears of pain and anger running down his cheeks. Nobody said anything for a moment, knowing the pain and what it was like to have a comrade die in battle. Hattori and Yuri, having felt the loss of it not so long ago, also understood what he was going through. Alright, it's not safe here. We have to go now. Kogetsu said, knowing they couldn't wait much longer with the state of things. Not to mention the possibility of being attacked again. Haku helped Isito up and supported his weight so he could stand on his bad leg. No, I can do it. He yelled, forgetting that his leg was in fact badly hurt. You need to stop and think for a moment, Isito. Remember your mission. Haku said, being kind to him before he helped him again, this time Isito letting him take his weight, knowing he was right. Alright everyone, let's get moving, Kogetsu said, getting a nod from everyone. Wait. Isito yelled, turning his head to look back at Horaim's body. We have to leave her behind and proceed with the mission, Kogetsu said bluntly. No way. We can't just leave her behind. Isito shouted, clearly not accepting what needed to be done. We don't have time for this, Kogetsu said before he nodded to Haku. Sorry about this, Isito, he said with a smile. Isito didn't even have time to think before Haku swiftly chopped him in the back of the neck, knocking him out cold and catching his body before it fell. Nobody said a word before Koyuki piped up. About time someone shut him up, she said, getting no comment from the others. With that, the squad finally moved out, heading for the hidden waterfall village just as they had planned before running into Isito and his squad. The lot of them had been traveling for some time now, heading in the direction of the hidden waterfall and soon coming across the secret entrance to their land. Are you sure this is the place? Koyuki asked as she looked over at Haku. This is it, he said, looking at the large cave formation that would lead them where they needed to go. This is the place, Kogetsu also said, confirming Haku's words. Come on, let's get inside, Kogetsu said, about to take another step forwards. Hold it. A voice suddenly yelled, stopping him and the others in their tracks. Look, above us, Kimimaro said, remaining calm. The others all looked up, seeing that they had been surrounded by waterfall ninja, seeming to be guarding the entrance to the cave. Look, they are mist shinobi, one of the waterfall ninja said, noticing the headbands they were wearing. I can see that, the leader of their group said. But how do we know they are friends and not enemies in disguise? He said, causing the others to grow suspicious. We have been sent by our Mizukage and the Hokage to aid you in your battle with the enemy nations. Although we have been delayed and split up, others should have already arrived, Kogetsu said, trying to reason with them. The leader of the waterfall unit gave them a hard look. I will ask you this only once, he said. What is the code word? Everyone looked at each other to see if anyone else knew what it was, not remembering being told anything about a code word. Even Kogetsu didn't know there was a code word. We don't know the code word, Kogetsu said, knowing what was most likely about to happen next. The waterfall shinobi all made their weapons ready as they waited for their leader to give the order. If you don't know the password, then you have no business being here. And if you have no business being here, then you might as well be dead, the waterfall leader shouted, lifting his arm as he got ready to give the signal. Everyone was put on their back foot, seeing as how the waterfall ninja had them surrounded and had the high ground. Things didn't look good for them at all. Now what do we do? Koyuki asked, jumping back to back with Chika, who also seemed worried. Be ready everyone, things could get messy here, Kogetsu said, also not knowing what to do. Wait. A weak voice said, seeming to grab everyone's attention. Ganryu, Kogetsu asked, knowing that he should be too weak to speak at this point. I have the password, Ganryu said in his weakened state. Hold it, the waterfall leader said, stopping his men from attacking at the last second. The password is, when fire and ice meet, the land shall become fresh once more, Ganryu said before he passed out again. Everyone remained quiet for a moment as they waited to see what was about to happen. That is indeed the password, the waterfall leader said, lowering his weapon and standing upright and putting his own men at ease. Get these men inside, boys, it looks like they could use a hand. Kogetsu and the others breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the pressure being taken off of them. All right, everyone. Let's get those that needed medical attention and then regroup with the others. Yes, sir, everyone said before they followed the waterfall ninja into the cave, heading towards their next mission. Okay, going to end this one here. I hope you are enjoying the story, and as always thank you all for your support. Chapter 146, Enter the Hidden Waterfall. Kimimaro, Haku, and the others had now reached the entrance to the land of the hidden waterfall village. Although meeting some resistance, they had been successful in gaining entry at the avoidance of violence. Meanwhile, word of the situation had reached the ear of Fuyona back in the Hidden Mist Village, causing him to worry somewhat as to how the other nations had gotten word of their plan to send reinforcements to support the waterfall. I'm sure they are all right, Mei said, trying to put Fuyona at ease. Fuyona placed the report on the table, seeing that Mei was just as worried as he was. The report says that under half of the units we sent made it to the land of waterfalls, Fuyona said, not seeming pleased with the situation. Looks like the Akatsuki is on the move again, Mei added, seeing the report mention Zabuza. Yes. Perhaps it is time I dealt with them myself, Fuyona said, knowing he had allowed them to plot and move too long. You can't be serious. Even you can't take them all on alone, Mei said, knowing what he was thinking. Not all of them, he said, turning on his chair to look his wife in the eyes and getting a questioning look in return. What are you planning, Fuyona? Mei asked, not liking where this could be going. For now, nothing, Fuyona said bluntly, still unsure of how to approach this whole situation. Mei breathed a small sigh of relief, knowing from the intel they had on the group so far, even Fuyona alone might not be a match for all of them. Something she feared for the worst. It's all right, Mei. For now, we have no choice other than to wait and see what their next move is, Fuyona then said as he stood up and took her hand in his, causing Mei to feel at ease. No matter what, we will protect the village together, he then said, looking into her eyes, giving her confidence. No matter what, she then said, leaning in to kiss him as she did. Kimimaro and Haku had arrived at the village hidden in the waterfalls with the others. Everyone had been allowed some time to rest and recover from the journey, with those who needed it being given medical attention, such as Ganryu and Isito. Kakashi had taken overall command of the remaining force now that Ganryu was out of commission for a little while. However, everyone had simply been put on standby for the time being, gathering everyone in the main hall located at the top of the village. The whole place was a small wonder to behold. The group had been escorted through a dangerous cave system filled with traps and waterways that seemed to run in all directions, causing one to become lost if following the wrong one. Once they had finally come to the exit of the cave system, they arrived at a large lake that was at the center of the village, with a large and beautiful tree, seeming to give life to the people and also provide a natural defense to their home. The group had been escorted towards the main building that overlooked the village, giving them the impression that was where their leader was based. Once there, they were reunited with Kakashi and the other squads that had also made it to the village in one piece, with Ganryu and anyone else who had been injured being taken away for medical treatment. So this is the final team to make it here? Kakashi asked, knowing that Kogetsu was the next in command after Ganryu. It would seem that way, Kogetsu said, being able to see that only so few were here. Kimimaro, Haku, and Koyuki took a good look at Kakashi, remembering him from their mission in the Land of Snow. Good to see you three again. Kakashi then said, realizing who they were. You too, sir, Koyuki said, while Haku and Kimimaro simply nodded. It sure has been a while, Kakashi said, before having his attention taken from one of the waterfall ninjas. Excuses me, but Lord Hizen would like to speak to whoever the leaders of your group are. One of the waterfall envoys said. Of course, Kakashi said before turning to Kogetsu. Shall we? Kakashi asked. Certainly, Kogetsu said before turning to look at Kimimaro and the others. Wait here for my return. Once I have spoken to the head of the village here, then we will have a better idea of what to do next. Kogetsu said, getting a nod from the rest of the group. Kimimaro and the others watched as Kogetsu and Kakashi walked away with the waterfall ninja, leaving them alone in the large hall. So now what are we supposed to do? Chika suddenly asked while placing her hands behind her head. You dummy. Didn't you hear what Kogetsu said? Kujira suddenly yelled, growing tired of her ability to listen. Come on you two, stop it will ya? Rokuro also shouted, trying to keep the peace between them as they clashed heads. Both Captain Ganryu and Hattori are in the hospital. Not to mention the others from the Hidden Leaf Village. Koyuki said, simply ignoring Chika and Kujira. We were lucky to have made it here at all, Haku added, knowing that their battle with Zabuza could have taken a very different turn. The real question is how did the enemy know we were coming here in the first place? Kimimaro suddenly said, seeming to get straight to the point. The others stopped fighting and looked at him, not sure what he meant by that. What do you mean, Kimimaro? Kujira asked. Yeah, we are at war. Of course, the enemy nations are going to be patrolling the area. Chika also said as she punched Kujira on the head for ignoring her. I'm saying that somehow they knew we were on the move, Kimimaro said. I was also thinking the same thing. Haku suddenly said, agreeing with his brother and causing the others to remain silent for a moment. If what you are saying is true, then wouldn't that mean that there is a traitor somewhere in our village? Koyuki said, causing everyone to grow tense. Not just our village. Haku then said, causing the atmosphere to grow even tenser. Meanwhile, both Kakashi and Kogetsu followed the waterfall ninja who was escorting them to meet the leader of the village himself. Both of them had heard of the men in question before, but neither of them had a face to put to the name. Sir, I have brought both of them as requested. The waterfall ninja said, bowing down before his leader. Thank you. A deep voice coming from behind a sliding paper door said, waiting for him to lift his head and take his leave. It was quiet for a moment while both Kakashi and Kogetsu waited for the head of the waterfall village to address them. So, you are what they sent me, eh? A rough voice said from behind the cover. Suddenly the paper doors that concealed the man's appearance opened and revealed him to them. So we have Kakashi the copy ninja. And, who the hell are you? The head of the waterfall village said, not seeming impressed. My name is Kogetsu, sir. Formerly of Lord Mizuki's personal umbu guard. Kogetsu said as he lowered his head. Is that so? Well, if the Mizuki has sent one of his own, then I'm sure you can hold your own. He said, having already weighed them both up with a fierce stare. So this is Hizen, leader of the hidden waterfall. Kakashi thought as he took in his appearance. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Hizen, leader of the hidden waterfall village. Hizen then said as he stood to his feet to give them both a proper greeting. Hizen had short smooth brown hair that was graying on the outside and tips, with just the top of his head still having brown hair. He wore a black waterfall forehead protector around his forehead and his hair hung over the left and right sides of it. He also had small black colored eyes and a small brown colored goatee that framed his face. Now that the introductions are in order, I guess we can get to the reason you are both here. Hizen then said, growing more serious again and getting both Kakashi's and Kogetsu's undivided attention. Alright, going to end this one here. Chapter 147, Chapter 147. Both Kakashi and Kogetsu stood before Hizen, the leader of the hidden waterfall village, as they made their introductions. The situation was delicate with the loss of their forces due to the stone's ambush tactics. Still, Hizen seemed keen on making the most of their presence, even if Kakashi did get the sense he was willing to sacrifice them for the greater good of his village. Our scouts have indicated that the enemy forces are trying to surround the entrance to our village and work their way in through the cave system, Hizen said. However, I cannot allow this to happen. He then said after a brief pause. I am planning on launching a full counterattack that will cause even the mighty stone village to crumble. Hizen said with conviction. And just how are you planning on doing such a thing, sir? Kakashi asked, seeming skeptical. With your help, we will target the enemy's stronghold that has been set up along the border of our land with the land of Earth. That is where we will strike, hitting them with everything we have at the same time. Hizen said, getting both Kakashi's and Kogetsu's full attention. What will such an attack achieve? Kogetsu asked, not sure how taking out a border stronghold would help their village. I thought you might ask that. Hizen said before he stood to his feet, crossing his arms over his chest. You see, due to the land of Earth terrain, in order for them to supply goods as fast as possible to their frontline troops, they have to follow the smooth road that follows along our border towards the land of grass until they reach their next stronghold, finally leading them to Canopy Bridge, something I think you are familiar with, Hizen said, looking Kakashi in the eye as he triggered the memory. I see. Kakashi said after a moment to think about it. This way you not only cripple the supply line of the Stone Village, aiding the Leaf and Mist in their war effort, but you also take out their ability to lay siege to your own village, leaving them open to attack from the other major villages, Kakashi said. Kogetsu was also impressed with the details of his plan, knowing that Fuyona must have sent them for this very reason, but decided to withhold the information for some reason. This plan is set to take place in 1 week's time, so I expect you to gather all of your manpower in that time, Hizen said, not seeming to care if some would still be injured or not. Very well, sir, Kakashi said, lowering his head a little out of respect. Kogetsu did the same thing and both of them slowly took a couple of steps backwards before dismissing themselves and leaving Hizen alone with his guards, watching as both Kakashi and Kogetsu left the room. With their help, we just might pull this off. He said, thinking hard about all of the details. Kogetsu and Kakashi both made their way out of the main hall after having had their meeting with Hizen. Both of them understood the plan and each of them knew that they would have to brief their own troops on the situation. I take it I can leave you to let Gonryu know the details? Kakashi asked. Kogetsu nodded. Of course. He said. Alright then, I'm going to go and tell my unit. I suggest you do the same and make the most of this time to rest and prepare. Kakashi said, heading off down one of the hallways. Kogetsu didn't say anything and headed back towards the main hall where he had left Kimimaro and the others. Hey look, Kogetsu is back, Koyuki said, getting the others' attention. The group had been sitting and waiting in the hall, making sure to keep to themselves and not cause any trouble. So, what's the plan? Chika asked, not being able to wait. Kogetsu remained silent for a moment before taking a deep breath. We will attack the stone's outpost along the border of the land of waterfalls and the land of earth, striking a direct blow to the enemy forces and cutting off one of their main supply lines. Kogetsu said. No one said a word as they processed the information. That makes sense. Haku then said, taking a moment to think about it. So when is this happening? Rokuro also asked. In 1 week, Kogetsu said. We move in 1 week, regardless of anyone who is injured or not. He then added. Do you think Captain Gonryu will be able to fight in a week? Chika asked, not seeming so sure herself. I don't know. But for now, I suggest we all get some rest and head to the accommodation that has been provided for us, Kogetsu said, getting an agreeing nod from everyone. I also think it will be best if we stay out of sight as much as we can. Kogetsu then added, getting another silent nod from everyone as they all followed him down one of the hallways. Anyway, that's how that fight ended up going, and let's just say it wasn't his best moment. A familiar voice said before its owner turned the corner with a small group of others, almost bumping into Kogetsu and the group. Wow, sorry about that. Didn't see you there. The boy said, instantly recognizing the hidden mist headbands that they were all wearing. Hold up. You guys. The boy said, pointing to Kimimaro and the others. Who the hell is that? Chika said, not having a clue who he was. It's me. Boten. We took the Chunin exams together. He said, helping to jog their memories. Oh, that's right. I remember you now. Rokuro said, giving him a nod. I take it you are here to help us with the up-and-coming attack. Boten said, seeing that they had all been through a tough time. That's right, Kimimaro said, remembering Boten had been on Hattori's squad during the final exam. Well, if you guys need anything, let me know. I don't know how you guys fared after the exams, but I was promoted to Chunin. Boten said, flashing them a smile. That's good to hear. Perhaps a small tour of your village would be good, Kimimaro asked, taking advantage of his offer. Boten smiled before he gave his reply. Sure, how about tomorrow? He said. That would be great. Haku then said, stepping forwards. All right, I will meet you at your living quarters tomorrow then, make sure to get some rest. Boten then said, giving them a thumbs up. With that, Boten and Kimimaro bid each other farewell and went their separate ways, with Kogetsu leading the others to where they would be staying in the waterfall village. The leader of the village was kind enough to provide us with some living accommodation in the quieter part of the village, meaning we can stay out of the way for the most part, Kogetsu said as they walked along a dirt path through some grassland to a large building. As long as it has a bath, anything will do for me, Chika said, placing her hands behind her head while walking. I'm sure it will be fine, Kogetsu said with a smile, also being from the Hozuki clan so he knew what she meant. After the effort it took us to get here, I'm just looking forwards to getting some rest. Koyuki also said, feeling that her muscles were stiff and starting to cramp. I think we are all due a good rest, Kogetsu said, also remembering the events of the past few days, including his battle with Zabuza. The group quickly arrived at the building to find an old man waiting for them. The man was quick to hand out keys for each of them that had a room number on each. Okay, make sure you all get settled in. And make sure to get some rest, Kogetsu said, getting a nod from everyone as he looked over them. These last few days have been hard on all of us, he thought, seeing the dirt and bruises on their bodies. But things are only going to get worse from here. Alright, that's the end of this chapter. I hope you are enjoying it, and as always, thank you for your support. If there is anything you would like to see or any ideas you have for the story, also please feel free to drop me a message anytime with them. Chapter 148, Chapter 148. Kimimaro and the others took their keys from the old man and bid goodnight to each other. The hour had ground late and nobody felt like staying up and being social. Haku and Kimimaro were sharing a room and entered it together, seeing a set of single beds, one being on each side of the room. Basic, but cozy, Haku said with the gentle smile he always wore on his face. Yeah, Kimimaro said as he dropped his bags and headed over to the bathroom. Haku simply walked over to one of the beds and placed his own bag on the bed, slowly sitting on it to test how comfy it was. Being pleased, he quickly dropped back and let the bed take his full weight, feeling his body sink into it. Haku could feel his body was aching from the journey, not to mention the fighting. Kimimaro also felt the same, having battled against Zabuza again. The pair had been training so hard, putting their body through hell under the teachings of Mei. And yet still they were no match for Zabuza. Kimimaro could feel himself getting angry over the thought and instead tried to think about something else. I wonder how father is, Haku suddenly said, getting his brother's attention. I'm sure father is fine. After all, he is the strongest person I have ever encountered, Kimimaro said, knowing the power that Fiona had. Haku smiled as he stared up at the roof. Yeah. Nobody can defeat father, Haku then said, feeling his eyes slowly close as his mind gave way to sleep. Kimimaro could see that Haku had drifted off to sleep, knowing that it was getting late and that he should do the same. However, his mind was far too busy for that and he knew he wouldn't be able to sleep just yet. Looking at his hand, Kimimaro allowed a bone to slowly grow from his palm until it was long enough to match a dagger. A small current of lightning-style chakra suddenly burst to life around the bone before it began to channel through it. The sound was rather loud and Kimimaro quickly allowed his chakra to settle not long after using it to create the lightning style. The added effect of the lightning style had given his already deadly taijutsu an even greater edge, so to speak. After learning that his father, Fiona, could also use lighting style to amplify his bones from Mei, he too had strived to learn to do the same, following him in his footsteps. Although the process had not been an easy one, Kimimaro had proved that he was much more adept in the feat than he had thought. Not only that, but he had also been working hard on being able to control the power of the three tails that was sealed inside of him. Kimimaro let his thoughts wander on for a little while longer, knowing that the hour grew late and it was now time to try and sleep. After all, tomorrow would bring with it new challenges. With that, everyone who had joined the expedition team to aid the waterfall in the war had now arrived and settled now for the night. However, their losses had been greater than expected and not everyone had made it in one piece. Now was the time to rest and mourn for the loss of those that had not made it, or wish for the recovery of those who did but were in bad shape. The next day came quickly for the group, finding the rays of the rising sun unpleasant as they wished for more sleep. However, the duties of a ninja never ended, and digging deep into their will and ninja way forced themselves to rise. Kimimaro and the others slowly made their way out of their rooms and into the corridor, finding that everyone felt the same, with some a little worse than others. "Aman, I could have used another 10 hours of sleep," Chika said as she yawned and stretched her arms like a cat. "You say that no matter how many hours of sleep you get," Kojiro said as he crossed his arms. "Glad to see you all in good spirits," Kogetsu said, suddenly making an appearance from the main entrance of the building. "Good morning," everyone said, greeting him with respect. "What's the news, sir?" Haku asked, seeming keen to know. Kogetsu nodded. "Ganryu is going to make a full recovery, thanks to the medical ninja here in the village. He has also instructed me to take over command while he is recovering. However, I will be stuck in a meeting for most of the day while I strategize with Kakashi of the Leaf," he said. "So in other words, we have a day off?" Koyuki asked, placing one hand on her hip. "That's right," Kogetsu said, shrugging his shoulders. "All right." Chika suddenly yelled, getting everyone's attention. "I wouldn't jump for joy just yet, Chika," Kogetsu said to his younger cousin. "After all, we are still at war, and could be forced to move at any point," he said with a more serious tone. "That is why I want you all to stay out of trouble, and keep yourselves sharp for what is to come." His words hit home to the group, making them realize what they would have to face in the coming week. Each of them knew they were still ill-prepared for this war, and it would only force them to react in one of two ways. "Is there somewhere we can train?" Kimimaro asked. Clearly choosing the first option. Kogetsu smiled, already expecting him to ask that. "It just so happens that I already asked the question for you. There is a training field not far from here to the south. The leader of this village has granted permission for us to use it as much as we like," Kogetsu said. Yeah. Training is great and all, but I'm gonna have to get some good food in me first," Chika said, causing Kogetsu to sigh. "I also thought that would be coming," he said to himself. "A mess hall has been opened for us on the outskirts of the village. We will be provided with 3 meals a day, Chika," he said, knowing what she was like. "Is food and sleep all you think about?" Kujira asked. Chika shrugged her shoulders before placing her hands on her hips. "Whatever, I'm starving. Can we go and get some breakfast now or not?" she said, clearly getting hangry. "All right, let's go and get some breakfast. After that, the day is your own," Kogetsu said, turning around to lead them towards the mess hall so that they could all enjoy some food. The group arrived at the mess hall and to their surprise were greeted by Hattori and Yuri, who was already sitting down eating. "Hattori," Koyuki asked, seeing that both of them seemed in good health. "Seems you have made a quick recovery," Haku also said, taking a seat next to them. "Yeah. I just had some bruised ribs, so the doctor was able to get me healed rather quickly with medical ninjutsu," Hattori said, rubbing the area he had been kicked by Zabuza. "So, what is the plan?" Hattori then said, wanting to get back to business right away. Kimimaro smiled at him as the others all sat down around them at the table. "We are going to have a squad training session," he said, getting a smirk from Hattori. "I'm game." "Yeah, it will be a great way for us to improve on our strength and teamwork," Rokuro said, getting a nod from the others. "All right, we had better eat so we can build our strength," Koyuki then said, getting a nod of agreement from the others before they all got up to go and get their food. A few hours had now passed, allowing the group to eat their fill for breakfast thanks to the generosity of the waterfall chiefs. Their food had now settled and their bodies felt rejuvenized, giving them the strength that would be needed for the training they were about to partake in. The group found themselves on the training field, being the only ones of the allied forces who wanted to do any training. "So, what exactly did you have in mind, Kimimaro?" Koyuki asked with her arms crossed. The others all waited to see what he was thinking, also wondering the same thing. "We are going to form a 3-man team at random. Our goal will be to get both tags off of the opponent using all of our skills if needed," Kimimaro said, showing everyone the clip-on tags they would be using. "That sounds fun," Kujira said, liking the idea of a battle. "Obviously we will avoid killing techniques. But other than that, we should come at each other with everything we have if we want to get stronger," he said, being serious about this training. Everyone else nodded in agreement, also liking the idea he had come up with. "There are 8 of us. How are we going to decide who will be on whose squad?" Hattori asked, having already done the math. "Maybe I can help with that," a voice said, grabbing the attention of the others. "Who is that?" Koyuki asked, not sure who exactly the person was. Kimimaro and the others were also confused as to who this newcomer was. However, they wore the hidden mist headband and looked to be around the same age as them, having short black hair and blue eyes. "Sorry, my name is Kiran. I'm a mist ninja like you," he said, flashing them a smile. "Oh. I think I recognize him," Kujira said, not sure if he had seen him before. "Kogetsu said you were doing some training out here, and I thought I would join you," he said. Everyone seemed to let their guard down a little more at the mention of Kajitu's name. He said you might be weary, so he also gave me this, Kiran said, throwing a scroll to Kimimaro to read. Haku took the scroll and read it, seeing that the handwriting was the same. This is Kiran. I have instructed him to come and train with you today. Make sure you treat him well and watch out, he is pretty strong. Kogetsu, the letter read. Nice to meet you, Kiran. Haku said, giving him a friendly smile. The others seemed to relax a little more too, seeing that Haku wasn't worried. Looks like you arrived just in time, Kiran. We could use the extra numbers. Koyuki said, greeting him herself. The others explained the rules of the training one more time to him so he was on the same page, before turning back to the matter of how they would pick teams. Kiran watched and listened to Kimimaro as he seemed to take a natural leadership role with the group looking up to him. However, Kiran was not who he was pretending to be. In fact, he was someone much closer to the group than they realized. I'm excited to see how much they have grown. Fuyona said to himself as he watched through his transformation jutsu. This should be fun indeed. He then thought before being snapped back into the conversation. Did you get that, Kiran? Haku asked. Oh, yes. He said, nodding before he extended his hand to join the game. Alright, on my signal we will play rock paper scissors, that is how we will decide who is on whose squad, Kimimaro said, getting a nod from the others. Alright, 1, 2, 3.